yeah, arriving in my own hometown, it's pretty special. I mean, it will be a lifetime experience because of, yeah, I'm living 4 kilometers from the finish line, so that's, I think, quite close. But yeah, I try to be as relaxed as possible, but yeah, it's going to be a big day for sure.
We haven't seen much of Fabian Cancellara so far in this race, but we should see plenty of him today because stage 16 is being held in his honour with a finish in his hometown of Bern in Switzerland as he rides his final tour before retirement. There's a cobble climb inside the final few kilometres that would have been made for a Fabs attack in his prime, but today's stage interests too many other teams, perhaps even for him to launch a late attack for old time's sake. Among the most interested parties are Dimension Data, who were reminded, as if they needed reminding, that today is Nelson Mandela Day, which Steve Cummings marked last year with the South African team's first ever Tour de France stage win. Hello, it's Fabian Cancellara Day on the Tour, it's Nelson Mandela Day in the wider world, and it's the third of 3 days of national mourning in France. So the first piece of business here at stage 16 at the finish, a piece of French territory in the heart of Switzerland, was a minute's silence for the victims of the Nice attack.
Merci à toutes et à tous. Madame votre suivante, s'il vous plaît.
Now, let's check the standings for you coming into stage 16. No change in the top 5 yesterday. Still Chris Froome, Bauke Mollema, Adam Yates, Nairo Quintana and Alejandro Valverde. Romain Bardet is up to 6th and Richie Porte to 7th as TJ Van Garderen lost time. He's 8th ahead of Dan Martin and Fabio Aru. Adam Yates, Peter Sagan, Adam Yates, I beg your pardon, still leads the white jersey competition by 3 minutes from Louis Meintjes, and really they're the only two in it. Warren Barguil is 16 minutes 20 down in 3rd. In the green jersey, Peter Sagan has a big lead over Mark Cavendish, 340 against 278. Marcel Kittel 3rd there at 228. Rafa Majka 2nd on yesterday's stage. His big day out got him the King of the Mountains jersey. 127 points he has now. Thomas de Gent didn't score at all. He's still on 90. Danny Navarro 3rd on 69. And Movistar are leading the team standings. It seems to be pretty important to them, but are they doing it at the expense of their team leader, Nairo Quintana? They lead Sky by 7 minutes and 8 seconds with BMC in 3rd place, and that's pretty much all you need to know. Let's get straight over to the commentary cupboard. Ned and David.
Thanks very much. Welcome to the cupboard, everybody. We'll be over to live racing in just a minute or so, very, very quickly indeed. But just to mark your card, this is a fascinating day today. Mark Cavendish flagged it up as a potential bunch sprint, but David, here in this fantastic capital city of Switzerland, we don't think it's going to be the case, do we?
No, it doesn't look like it. It's a much more interesting finish than your classic sort of coming for a sprint. It's got a bit of a mixture of a cobbled section and then no descent and a little further climb for about 600 metres, and it opens it up to all sorts of possibilities.
Absolutely. Now, these climbs right at the end aren't categorised, but they're significant. They'll have a big say in the outcome of the race. We went out on our bikes earlier today. Beautiful morning it was in Bern, and this is what we found, and it will surprise people if they haven't done their reconnaissance. Along the river, it's about 2.5k to go. cobbled section, that looks relatively benign, but then it kicks up Flanders Classic style, really quite steep, sort of 12-14% gradients up to the top for a few hundred metres, and that will really string things out. So it's very interesting. And then there's another drag after that, which if you're not dying by then, you will be a bit later when you...
Yeah, I think it's what makes it quite an interesting finish, even if it's breakaway or bunch. It's going to, for both of those, it's going to be very tactical. It's a very tactical finish. So yeah, I'm excited about watching it.
Yeah, and there's an exciting situation out on the race already, and mildly unexpected one as well. We've got a breakaway, as you can see, and it has an advantage of 5 minutes and 15 seconds, but this is the fascination. There are 2 men up the road with 4 men chasing. We'll get onto them in a second. The head of the race, well, they're both wearing the blue of Etixx Quickstep, and 2 of the big name players are up the road and having fun with the race today. Tony Martin, klaxon, danger, warning sign for everybody else, is having a Tony Martin day, and sitting on his wheel mostly but sharing the work, Julian Alaphilippe, who is still fired up after his furious descent yesterday when he had that mechanical and all the consequences. He was in a winning position, he believes, yesterday, and he still looks pretty furious.
No, I think this is the classic situation where yesterday didn't end well for him, although in my opinion he should be incredibly satisfied with the ride he did. I think deep down he knows the stage was his. He'd already broken away on the penultimate descent, and then had this series of mechanicals which in the end involved him changing a bike and having to wait 2 minutes for his team car and going through that process. So he came off the bottom of the climb from first place to last place of that group. And but what was remarkable, I found, was that he was then catching groups that had been dropped, and at that point were just satisfied with their position on the road and were resigned to their fate. And he just kept charging them forward and moving through them and going from group to group, and ultimately finished only 22 seconds behind the winners, the leaders. And that was an amazing ride. And I think he's probably got in last night so angry that he said to the team, "No, I'm doing something tomorrow. I've got to get this out of my system."
So that's how you interpret it. You also read into that, I guess, that Marcel Kittel has chalked this off as a no-hoper for him and allowed them to play a completely different tactic today. Yes, no?
I think so, but also it leaves the pressure. The team no longer has to ride. The rest of the sprinters' teams are now reading what Etixx Quickstep are doing as announcing the fact they're not going to control the race for Kittel. So although Alaphilippe's getting to vent his anger, Tony Martin's getting a good bit of TT training in. It's actually works out well for the team in both ways, because Kittel, for sure, they'll say it looks pretty hard, and he'd have said there's no point in working for me because I can't guarantee I can make it over that, so let's not invest all this manpower into controlling the race for me for the final. If I make it over it, then great, leave me one rider to help me position. But it's really is going to be a bit of a free-for-all. There are other teams like Peter Sagan's, even we've got Dimension Data, although Mark Cavendish, I've seen him do crazier things and make it over a finish like this to win a sprint. At the moment, I'd question it, but they have a second man who possibly could be excellent for this. That's Edvald Boasson-Hagen. So, and there's even, I'm thinking, John Degenkolb, who we saw come back to the fore in the last few days, who could be excellent for this as well.
Indeed. These are the 4 riders who are trying to chase, but they're not really eating into that 5 minutes advantage that the pair have. They're, I think, only about 4 minutes, well, a minute in front of the peloton, and they've still got about 4 minutes to make up, if not more, on Alaphilippe and Tony Martin, who are motoring. They are Timo Rosen, the young domestique from Lotto Jumbo. Lawson Craddock, again, a young rider, an American rider, very, very talented, newly signed to Cannondale Drapac. This is his first Tour de France, and really we haven't seen much of him yet. So first sign of visibility from that man, Lawson Craddock. Vegard Brein, also a youngster, the Norwegian, a lead-out man normally for Dan McClay. He's with Fortuneo Vital Concepts colours on his shoulders. And finally, perhaps a more familiar name to you, Nicolas Edé from Cofidis, the rider who was called up at late notice to the team of Cofidis when Nasser Bouhanni decided to have a fight in a hotel and injured his hand, ruling himself out. So those are the 4 in what is known as a chasse patate, David. And if you've been listening to our commentary over the last 2.5 weeks, you'll now be becoming familiar with that term. But if you're hearing it for the first time, what is a chasse patate?
The chasse patate is a commonly used term in French cycling when a break has already formed and another group of riders decides, or an individual leaves the peloton in pursuit of that breakaway. And if they don't make it, they're stuck in between the peloton and the breakaway, and that then is called the chasse patate, otherwise known as a potato chase.
Or indeed the chase of idiots. I think patate is also slang for a numpty, isn't it?
No, exactly.
Which is being disrespectful for 4 good young riders who are up the road. But the problem that they've got, even though there's 4 of them, is that the 2 who are working together at the head of the race are 2 of the best riders in the entire peloton.
Yeah, they are, and we've seen Tony Martin do this in the past, find himself in a breakaway and essentially erase all his personal objectives and work for his teammate that's there. He did it for Kwiatkowski a couple of years ago and ripped a stage to pieces. He's done it before a few years ago as well, and it's a great move. And it also, you can see the ferocity of the chase here, which at this point, only 106 kilometres from the finish with a 5-minute gap, it would be a much more pedestrian chase. But the moment Tony Martin goes off the front, everybody gets scared. You can't play games because he is one of the strongest bike racers in the world, and so that there is a chase and you see how the peloton's strung out. At this point in the race, you wouldn't expect that, but because of it being Tony Martin and Alaphilippe teammates off the front, it's a chase that can't be played with.
The first hour of their breakaway, they rode it at 49 kilometres an hour, Tony Martin and Julien Alaphilippe. Whether or not they can sustain this effort all the way to the end is a moot point. Do you think this is a hopeless cause, a lost cause, just an act of vain flamboyance, or do you really give it some credibility?
No, I give it some credibility. I think it's for a couple of reasons. For starters, it's Tony Martin, and the fact that it's Alaphilippe as well, who's a very strong rider. Even if it is, there is no futility to it, in my opinion, because it will, if nothing else, give a massive boost of morale to the team.
Le Château de Joux, the Joux Castle. You're going to see a lot of fortification on this route because it has been fought over hundreds of years. Once again, the foundations of this place were dated back to the 12th century, but really it was in the 19th century and the 18th century where it came into its own, fought over repeatedly. It's been a military fortification in various different hands and a feared state prison during the reign of Louis XV. Cold, damp cells in which the famous French revolutionary Mirabeau was held, amongst many others actually, including the German writer and playwright Heinrich von Kleist. So a lot of people have done a bit of time in the castle of Joux. It was even fought over in the Second World War. Actually, the sequence of fortifications that we will see, including the castles of Marla and Catinat, as well as Joux, halted or slowed down the German advance in 1940 before they signed an agreement and the Germans then finally occupied the forts. 105 kilometres if this is going to come off. It's an audacious ride and it's going to be fun because it's a rare thing to see 2 teammates go up the road, David, but you know all about it because you reminded me that you and David Zabriskie have had a similar day out.
Yeah, we did it back in the 2010 Vuelta a España, stage 14 actually. The old 2-up attack is always something you joke about in the peloton because it's something that you rarely get away with, and even if you do, you're so committed to it that you have to make it succeed or at least damage the peloton in the pursuit of you, otherwise you look like a bit of an idiot. So you go out, and I remember when we did it back at the Vuelta, Dave Zabriskie and I were at dinner the night before, and the team was on a bit of a high. We'd already won 2 stages with Tyler Farrar and Ryder Hesjedal, so we'd kind of satisfied our accounts regarding the sponsors and the expectations, and so we were left the last week to just race and do what we wanted. And Dave Zabriskie and I were laughing. We were like, you know what, tomorrow it's so boring, we're just going to go and we're going to go off the front on our own. And they were like, no, you won't. And we were like, we will. And
you did.
And then the next day we did it, and we just kept drifting off the front, I remember, and then we went, and that was it. And we got so deep into it that at some point we realised that, and the whole of, much like today, Movistar started chasing us massively because they realised the threat we posed. And eventually we realised that it was failed, and I pushed on. I just kept riding when Dave Zabriskie disappeared from my wheel. And I found out later that he'd then pulled over and hidden away in somebody's house for the peloton to pass because he was so embarrassed. And then got back on afterwards, and our teammates thought he'd won because they didn't pass him on the road, and so they got to the finish and they'd gone by everybody and hadn't seen him, and they didn't realise he was actually last man on the road, hanging head in shame. Yeah. So I don't think Tony Martin and Julien Alaphilippe will be doing that today. I don't think either of them will be hiding in the driveway.
That's magnificent. characteristic of Dave Zabriskie, as far as I remember the guy. Former yellow jersey wearer on the Tour de France. And a really curious chap. Right, it's all strung out, isn't it? Single file in big blocks of teams. The Iron Cycling boys have got themselves all together, working off the celebrations last night after that famous win from Jarlinson Pantana. What a victory that was. There he is as well, Pantana.
They do look like they're working off celebration. Can't hold the wheel there. But this just shows how fast this chase is. Like I said, 103 kilometres to go to have a peloton lined out, and the Chasse Patate is now over. So now there's only 2 riders left in front of the peloton.
Couldn't be simpler, the race situation. Could not be simpler. Lawson Craddock, Timo Rosen and Vegard Brein are engulfed in the peloton, and I think Nicolas Day was already... No, there he is. Day was the last man standing out of that quartet. In fact, he had a teammate, Cofidis ride, I think it was Geoffrey Soup, right at the front of that chase as well. And I was wondering why Cofidis were working when they had a man up the road. And obviously it was because they knew that that group of 4 is going nowhere. And exactly that has been proven to be the case. So just 2 men up the road with a 5-minute advantage. And you can read a lot into the teams who are doing the chasing. So we've got BMC doing a lot of work. So too are Tinkoff. And Cofidis is less clear who they might be riding for, but in the case of BMC and Tinkoff, fairly obvious, isn't it? That's got to be Van Avermaet and that man Peter Sagan.
Yeah, for sure. They would definitely be the 2 favourites, I'd say, for today, because of the difficulty of this finish. But I mean, and this is actually turning the race into the perfect scenario for them, because by keeping it quite hard all day, if it had been a group of 2 riders had gone, I don't mean this to sound badly, but 2 smaller riders had gone off the front, 2 that they could control easily and weren't scared of, then the peloton would ride quite easily all day, doing the old cat and mouse game, and we'd see a much more grouped up peloton here, and it would be much easier for everybody. Now, if it was easier all day, that would make it more difficult in the finish for Peter Sagan and Greg Van Avermaet to make a difference. They need it to be like this all day, strung out, fatiguing the sprinters, because that means when Mark Cavendish, Marcel Kittel, Greipel get to those last 3Ks, they'll already be tired, and that means it'll be easier for them to distance them, because they won't be taking it for granted that they can drop Greipel, Kittel and Cavendish. They understand, they've got a lot of respect for them, that they're going to have to make this race hard, and they're going to have to hit that final 3Ks extremely fast in order to distance them.
102 kilometres and about to pass into Switzerland. So we are heading towards border country, and from France into, first of all, the canton de Neuchâtel, before eventually we get into the canton of Berne. So there we are, La Suisse. They have left the European Union. The Tour de France has done a Brexit. Out they go, and passing into Switzerland. And Tony Martin is on the front with Julien Alaphilippe, and that's going to be the case for, what, is he going to do about 70% of the work here? 80%, as much as that even?
It seems to be doing so much. We've barely seen Alaphilippe come through, so this might be a tactical decision, because we have to remember as well for Ethics Quickstep. Just seeing if I could hear anything that the Direct Sportif was saying. Because normally Julien Alaphilippe on a finish like this, if he was in the peloton, you'd still consider him as being one of the favourites for this. We saw him finish second to Peter Sagan on stage 2 in a finish that was much like this. We know that he's very strong in the bunch finishes where they are difficult in the final. So they've got themselves in a bit of a situation in that the team's possible favourite for today's finish from the bunch is actually up the road with their Super Domestique. So although it's a bit of fun and they're doing something that is challenging the peloton, it also might be compromising their chances.
The other team working at the front is the team of Direct Energie, and Brian Coquard in mind. Pretty sure he'd be their aspiration for the day. He's certainly a climber who rates himself on the uphill finishes and is suited to that. Small, explosive power. And he's actually said, I think, on a number of occasions that this finish might well suit him. So they believe in him today, and he came so close, didn't he, Brian Coquard, to getting his debut maiden Tour victory when he was just edged out on the line by the Ethics Quickstep man, Marcel Kittel. 23 millimetres separating the 2 men on that occasion, their front wheels. How often have we seen that on the Tour de France down the years? Tony Martin, with that pendant lower lip and the sweat running off his chin in full time trial mode. He's an absolutely awesome athlete. But he's going to have his work cut out. As you can see, the time gap is beginning to come down now. The combination of teams and the big riders on the front, well, surely they have it in their favour, and the balance of power remains firmly with the peloton, even if they're going to be forced to work pretty hard to bring these two back. 4:25 is the advantage now. Front two riders have passed from France into Switzerland, where they will spend the rest day. Don't forget, tomorrow they can recover. I don't think how unusual it is to have a rest day on the Tuesday of the final week of the Tour. Feels unusual to me, but I haven't gone back through recent years to see how often that's been the pattern. But
the Tour de France, I can't remember. I'm sure at the Volta a España and the Giro d'Italia we have done that, and it does make for a longer middle week. Even that one day makes it feel massive, because that second week is always the hardest physically and psychologically. When we see the feed zone, it's already splitting a bit there, because that's the pace it's been on, and they're not slowing down at all at the front. They're not handing out gifts. Often the team at the front who's doing the chase, when they come to the feed zone, they will slightly lower the pace in order to just out of respect for the peloton. But today they're not doing that. Look at that, there's gaps opening up ahead, and that's simply because they want to make this race hard, and they're not allowing Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe to get any headway at all.
there was a gap even right at the very front of the peloton just then, wasn't there, with Jeffrey Soup going off the front and flicking his elbow, unaware of the fact that he'd opened up 5 or 6 bike lengths to the BMC rider on the front. So they're forcing the pace, definitely. And if gaps do emerge, as you can see them rejoining in the peloton today, for once, it's not about the crosswinds. It's sultry and still in this area of Switzerland, or France, where the peloton still is. Roasting hot and really quite unpleasant in some ways, unless you like it hot.
They'll know from this race situation now that the peloton is not going to let Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe go up the road. They can see, they'll have the TV images, the car that's behind this peloton will be phoning ahead to the car that's behind Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe and say, look, their chase is on, they're not letting you guys go. So that's probably the point where they say, okay, Tony, you do everything now, just let Julian sit on. Because Julian, we're going to save you for the finish. So no work, you sit on Tony Martin, and Tony's just going to go as long as he can and keep the peloton stressed, because ultimately Julian Alaphilippe is getting a bit of a free ride. He doesn't have to worry about position. He can just, it's like he's out motor pacing a human being, of course, but it's not a bad position for him to be in now.
Through the customs checkpoint they go. No need for passport control. That's already been preordained and pre-organised by the Tour de France organisers, and they move from France into Switzerland. 98 kilometres of this race remaining. One intermediate sprint that might be interesting, especially if the race has come together, is at 41.5k to go. So we've got plenty of racing until we get to that point. And we've still got Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe up the road with an advantage that is beginning to come down quite fast. It's extremely fast on the road to Switzerland today. And all the very best of luck with that. And the best of luck for anyone who is trying to pick the winner today, because you can argue a case for so many different riders, including, of course, Mark Cavendish. The one thing the 2016 Tour de France has taught us all, it's you never say never with Mark Cavendish. And if he's in the mood, he could just do it. But his team in itself contains a number of candidates. We've already mentioned Edvald Boasson-Hagen and how this might suit him, but I don't think he's the only one. How about Steve Cummings, as we look back at Mark Cavendish, who's towards the rear of the peloton? It's normally where you'd see Steve Cummings, and he is notable by his absence, David.
He is. That is telling us something, because we're so used to his style of racing. It is sitting almost always last man in the peloton, or he's off the front in a breakaway. So the fact he's neither means something's going on. Yeah, and you
actually rarely see Mark Cavendish in that position unless he's recovering from a mechanical or working his way back up. So I wonder how telling that shot was.
Well, today's finish is quite an interesting one, because it could equally. So you have the sprinters. It's more of an outsider chance that they can make it to sprint those final 200 meters for the win. They'll be if they do, it's going to be a desperate scrap for them. There's more we'd expect to actually be competing in the sprint. Greg van Avermaet, Peter Sagan, John Degenkolb if he is going better. But then there's the other type of rider, the puncher sort of, or time trialist, strong mixture of all things, the Tom Dumoulin or Edvald Boasson-Hagen, or even a Ramonas Navadauskas or Jasper Stuyven. These are the sort of riders who could, over the top, when everyone's looking at each other, pausing, could go and attack and form a little move. It's the perfect Philippe Gilbert, who's not here. Philippe Gilbert's this sort of finish would be ideal for him, because it's got a striking resemblance to the Amstel Gold Race, and Michael Matthews, of course. It's where it's a very hard finish, but then it comes to the top and you've got 1,200 metres of flat to the finish line. So Michael Matthews is also somebody we haven't talked about, who this will be something, no doubt, is a perfect finish for him.
Well done. You've tossed in about a dozen names there, and you haven't even mentioned Peter Sagan, who'll probably go on and win it.
Making a conscious effort.
Comfortably, yeah. I mean, it suits Peter Sagan, but just about every day on the Tour de France suits him. And he has got one rider, I think it's Maciej Bodnar, who was his accompanying rider when he took his stage win. Maciej Bodnar. Looked for a minute when, as if Peter Sagan wanted to gift Maciej Bodnar his stage, but Chris Froome decided otherwise into Montpellier and basically forced Peter Sagan into out-sprinting Chris Froome and taking the win on that day in the crosswinds. So Bodnar's been sent up, which implies that Peter Sagan likes the look of today, and Greg van Avermaet has most of his team working hard for him. BMC and Direct Energie for Brian Coquard are probably, in terms of numbers, the teams doing most of the work at the front. And now, Julien Alaphilippe is definitely helping Tony Martin out. He's seen the advantage tumble, really, from over 5 minutes, down to 3:40, which was beginning to spell the end of their day out. And I think if they're determined to make this stick, then Alaphilippe now has to contribute a little and allow Tony Martin to recover and then get back on the front. He can't do it all on his own.
No, even if the tactic is to save Alaphilippe a bit now, it's also good for them to tire the peloton out, and obviously they realise that they're deep in now. They may as well keep trying, because they can stabilise a bit. And Tony Martin, he can go longer if he gets these little rest periods. So even if they're still staying on the tactic where they want Alaphilippe to do as little as possible, it's best to give Tony Martin the little respite occasion of a minute, 2 minutes, to have something to eat, drink, let his heart rate drop, and regroup a little, and then get back on and do. It's like what you were saying before, Ned. He's probably, instead of doing 100%, he's doing 85, 90% of the work.
Yeah, it's enough, isn't it? Certainly enough. Over, what would it be, about 160 kilometres, maybe more, if they get all the way to the end. 209k in total. Took about 30k, we understand, before the breakaway was established this morning, and then they sprung this Ethics Quick-Step surprise. And it is a rare sight in a big race like the Tour de France. I can't remember last time we saw it, actually, in the Tour de France, have two riders in the same kit up the road. No,
it is rare, and we can see this. The last time I saw Tony Martin up the road in a two-man breakaway was at the 2014 Volta a España. It was early on in the race in the first week, and he found himself in a breakaway, and normally it was quite a long stage, and it went up to 8 minutes, 9 minutes, about 50k's, 60k's into the stage, and then everyone panicked because it was Tony Martin. They thought, well, maybe he can make it. And a chase started like this, equally distant from the finish line, just because there was absolute panic that we can't treat this as a normal two-man breakaway. We have to change the rules. We can't expect to just bring this all back in the last 50k's, 60k's. We're better to get it back under control as soon as possible and then let the race relaunch. And that goes to show how often the peloton will decide its tactics dependent on the riders in the break. And because of those two riders, you can see the chase that's going on now. Normally 87k's from the finish, it would be much more pedestrian. One whole team with 2 riders, 3 riders controlling it. We've got 4 teams, 5 teams there, 5 teams chasing down Tony Martin and Alaphilippe. That's the first time we've seen 5 teams working together, and that's because they're terrified of Tony Martin.
Tinkoff, Katusha, Fortunal Vital Concept, Direct Energie and Cofidis are the 5 that you mentioned. One team that you might have expected to be up at the front of the peloton aren't there at all, and I see no sign of them, and that's Trek Segafredo. Such a big day for Fabian Cancellara today, going into the city of his birth, Bern, which, for anyone, by the way, who hasn't ever been to the Swiss capital, go. It's magnificent. UNESCO World Heritage Site, which I'm sure the helicopters will show us in great detail when we get closer to it. But yeah, Cancellara hasn't really shown us to be, hasn't shown his He's not in the strongest year of his life, is he, in terms of his form in his final season of racing? He's done bits and pieces, but he's not been all-conquering.
No, but that's one of the reasons it's his final year. He feels that the end is nigh. That isn't to say he didn't have an excellent start to the year. He was winning races as the norm in the first couple of months, and he'd still got second at Tour of Flanders.
Strade Bianchi.
It's not. These are results that most people would base a career on, but we have such high expectations of him. So, but today, let's remember he's an objective-driven cyclist, and for sure this has been in his head since he knew about it, which will have been before us. He'd have known about it summer last year, no doubt.
Yeah, all the way down the line off the peloton. It's a big day out for people. A big opportunity to grab a stage win for some of the strongest men in the Tour de France. Welcome back. Now, while you were gone, this happened. Andre Greipel just dropping back off the peloton and picking up water bottles. And that, David, is not dramatic, but it is significant. And it tells us what the teams are thinking about the way this is going to pan out today.
Yeah, maybe he's already announced that today's a stage he's not interested in. So that's one of the reasons we don't see a Lotto Soudal rider up there contributing to the chase. And the fact that we see Andre Greipel loading up with bottles and food for his teammates, so he's decided to take a domestique and almost announce the fact that he's not going for the sprint. It's quite easy. It's a good way of showing people.
Yeah, and if that was Marcel Kittel, you'd go, well, yeah, fair enough. But Andre Greipel is actually such a rangy sprinter that, I mean, I'm thinking of the stage he won in the Giro this year in Benevento. That was, well, he had to get over a climb to get there, and then it was a drag all the way up. So it wasn't identical, but it wasn't totally dissimilar to today's either. So if he has already chalked it off, that does suggest that it won't be a bunch sprint as far as they're concerned.
No, I think they'll have done their due diligence regards those final few kilometres, and they'll be realistic. There's no point in wasting resources. They've done a lot of work, Lotto Soudal, for each sprint stage, and he's missed out so far. And perhaps if he'd won 2 or 3 now, they'd say, you know, sometimes it works like that. Everyone's like, no, we're going to give it a go. We don't care if you lose. It's worth giving it a go. But I think they've just decided they've cut their losses today.
In which case, who will they charge up the road? Tony Galopin, he'd be the obvious choice. I can't see. Maybe Adam Hansen would have a go in his own right, see how far he gets up.
Yeah, Jürgen Roelands as well, if he's feeling good. He's a good sprinter, classic sort of style sprinter for the harder finishes. But to be honest, I think they might be just giving themselves an internal day off. And if Galopin or De Gent feel good, then they'll go for it.
Well, that's the situation on the road. Julien Alaphilippe is tucked down, sweating, baking hot here. 3 minutes and 14 seconds the Etixx Quick-Step pair have over the rest of the peloton. And it's interesting to note, as Tony Martin has thought about his day out, that he has opted to wear an aero helmet, all closed, no vents, despite the heat. He must be absolutely cooking under there. And he's also got a skin suit on, and his bike has deep wheels as well, deep rims, so he must have anticipated this move. It was clearly pre-planned, and that is why he has decked himself out in almost full time trial kit here. Julien Alaphilippe, well, he's not the time trialist. He's the one that is expected, if this ploy works, to deliver the climb and the stage win. So, well, he is differently attired. A conventional racing jersey. He's got his standard shorts on, standard helmet as well. So that tells its own story. Now, I believe that we have got, talking of Etixx Quick-Step, at least I hope we have made contact once again with the Etixx Quick-Step Director Sportif, Brian Holm. I'm going to try the line. Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Brian, what a fantastic move that you've played today. We're enjoying it thoroughly. They've got 3 minutes and 14 seconds advantage. I guess that was pre-planned, maybe over breakfast or even dinner last night.
Yeah, that wasn't really planned. You know, with Tony Martin, you know, we don't know exactly what he's going to pull out of his top hat. And when he went off with Alaphilippe, to be very honest, we were a bit surprised also. But after a bit of discussing, we thought, like, let them go. And with Tony out there alone, he'd done it before. And we were talking to some teams before the start to work with us. And normally everybody said no. Well, Tony said, okay, today they can chase me instead. So everybody who normally doesn't chase it today. So like, quite
That's brilliant. Brian, what about how's Alaphilippe after yesterday? Because that was an amazing ride he did. Is this a bit of a revenge for him?
And just before you answer that, Brian, Alaphilippe looked like he was very angry and a little bit sweary yesterday. And I'd just like to remind you that you're live on British television. How is Julian Alaphilippe? How's his motivation?
I know that, but completely for last time. But after like 8 years with Mark Cavendish, it's just bad for your language. You know, he's really. I learned all that. You have to blame Cav for that. Sorry, but to answer your question, we was. We was beaten in the sprints like 4 or 5 times by Cav, and that was okay, of course painful. But he was faster. But yesterday with Alaphilippe, there was pure bad luck. You know, with his bike with the puncture. And was very, you can't say it afterwards, but I think we would have a fair chance to win the stage. And for sure, we all had sort of a winter depression after we went back to the hotel. It was not fun. Yeah. But it seemed like he's found his morale back and they're sitting in the Tony doing a bit of Tony pace.
Have you seen the finish today, Brian? So do you know it from Tour of Switzerland or Romandy? Because it looks like it would be a perfect finish for Alaphilippe.
It could sort of been it's probably Sagan. It's probably like Van Avermaet, Boas and Hagen. I think even Cav on a good day would have been possible. I think he won stages harder than that, you know. But I got an idea maybe they're going to like Ewald Boas and Hagen. And for Alaphilippe could be good, but still I don't think he'll be flying today. He's sitting behind Tony, you know, do just a minimum of work. So I still think he have a bit sore leg after yesterday's ride.
Brian, if this move doesn't work, they've got 3 minutes at the moment, but it's a long way still to go. If it does work, it's fantastic. What a brilliant coup. If it doesn't work, what's plan B?
Plan B, of course, we still have good sprinters in the team like Rekesa. He can go and like Van Modes or like sort of it's like today. I think most cyclist riders can have a decent way winning it. It's hard. It's probably too hard for Greipel and Kittel. That's why it doesn't work. So we'll wait and see how long they can hang on. But of course, Rekesa, who won the stage, who beat Sagan and Gaviria, he is part of our plan B.
Yeah, you've mentioned Peter Sagan a few times, and I would say you're right too. The big man is probably the favourite, but good luck with this move. We're really enjoying watching Martin and Alaphilippe up the road, and you've won the first half of the race already. Thanks very much for talking to us, Brian.
Thank you. Okay.
Speak to you soon.
Have a good day, gentlemen.
Thanks, Brian.
Ciao. Ciao.
Brian Holm reflecting on Etixx Quick-Step's day out and claiming that it was just a slightly spontaneous move by Tony Martin, who asked whether or not other teams would want to get involved, and since they didn't, he just said, well, I'll do it myself. And actually, knowing Tony Martin, you can buy into that.
No, you can, and it's when you have an engine like his and the strength and also when he wants to do something, he generally gets it done. Tony Martin, it's one of the reasons he's such a good time trialist. He's very good at focusing on his objectives. And today, and as Brian said, some teams you just get frustrated after a while of everyone watching you and being all the usual teams. I remember Mark Cavendish back in the day used to get infuriated that no teams would ever help Columbia High Road when he was on those teams. But it was normal because everyone didn't want to contribute to their victory because Cav was so good at that point in time. And it's getting a bit like that now, and Peter Sagan will probably find the same, and Kittel normally and Etixx Quick-Step, they have the same situation. So it's, instead of Tony Martin sitting on the front all day leading the peloton, he's gone off the front himself.
Two Trek Segafredo riders side by side there, and both of them could win this stage today. Obviously the camera was focusing heavily on Fabian Cancellara, given his status and given the fact that we're going to his hometown, but right alongside him to his right was Jasper Stuyven. And what we know of Jasper Stuyven and what we saw in the Cherbourg Peninsula on stage 2, we know that he could deliver a victory like this, so he's another rider to consider in some detail. That's always assuming that this breakaway comes back. 76.9k, a 3-minute advantage. This part of Switzerland, in fact this whole border territory, David, is famous for the production down the years of absinthe, known as the green or blue fairy. The what has it been in the past? An aphrodisiac, a stimulation for creation. In fact, there's a whole route here called the absinthe route. What I didn't know, though, and what I find quite interesting, is that it's banned in most countries, pure absinthe, except for Switzerland. They've legalised its distillation since 2005 again.
Yeah, it's one of those legendary drinks. You don't encounter it very often. In Paris, occasionally. It was Toulouse-Lautrec, wasn't it? That
Yeah.
did most of his work on absinthe.
Most of the damage to his synapses as well, I think. Forced him to walk a lobster in the park, as far as I remember, on a lead. That's what it does to you, absinthe, and this is what a long day out does to you. They've been out for a long time, Julien Alaphilippe and Tony Martin, taking a little bit of sustenance from Davide Bramati in the lead car. I think Brian Holm was talking to us from the car behind the peloton, the second car for Ethics Quickstep.
Yeah, normally he's car number 1, and car number 1 generally doesn't go with a breakaway. That's left to car number 2.
So Tony Martin in full time trial mode with the smaller figure of Julien Alaphilippe just tucked in behind him. Their advantage for the first time dips under 3 minutes. Welcome back. Dropping back to get bottles. Doff your cap at this man. 4 times he's won the World Championship time trial. Paris-Roubaix 3 times. The Tour of Flanders 3 times. 7 stages of the Tour de France. 11 stages of his home race, the Tour de Suisse. He's an Olympic champion and a former winner of Milan-San Remo. And he's worn the yellow jersey on the Tour de France. Fabien Cancellara in his final year of racing, his final Tour de France, heading home. That happened a couple of minutes ago, and this is the situation live on the road. 71.1k to go. 2:54 the advantage that they still have, Alaphilippe and Tony Martin, so they're holding steady at this point in the race. Plenty of racing still to come. No racing to come tomorrow, though. But we do have, as always, a rest day highlights show at 7 p.m.
I'm going to do whatever I can, obviously, to try and win the race.
Year on year it gets harder. There's more people that can win bike races now than there ever used to be.
Yeah, plenty to enjoy in the rest day show. Another good look at the running man of Chris Froome and a proper examination of women's cycling and what can be done to improve its offering. So 2:57, 69.6k to go on this fascinating day stage, and we are rattling through the Areuse gorges, and quite beautiful they are too. Waterfalls, ravines and small lakes, a feature of this rocky landscape. And in the distance you can see the big watery expanse that characterises this run-in. It's the lake of Neuchâtel, and that's the canton of Switzerland in which we find ourselves at the moment. Switzerland divided into different cantons, of course. Their equivalent of the départements. And eventually we'll cross into the canton of Bern, which I'm sure you knew before the Tour de France started was the capital of Switzerland. Not entirely sure why. I guess it's because they couldn't agree amongst themselves, given that Switzerland is trilingual at least between the various regional capitals of Zurich and Geneva. And so Bern is a handy compromise. But it's German-speaking, Bern. And it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Did you know that Bern was the capital of Switzerland before this tour got underway, David?
It was one of those things I did know but wasn't confident about declaring, hence why I asked you in the car on the drive here.
It's a bit like, what's the capital of Canada? That's another tricky one. We'll come to that. Everyone, you see, you've fallen straight into the trap. Everyone at home is thinking, is it Montreal? It's not. 3 minutes, so it's going out slightly. I'll give you the answer shortly. And we're in the foothills of some massive mountains. Spectacular when we drove into Switzerland last night, just as the sun was going down, to see that mountain range unfold in front of you, because those peaks I mean, I'm no geologist and I'm certainly no alpinist, but they seem to put the French Alps to shame. I mean, they are vast, the Swiss Alps. We're just nipping into Switzerland, though. It's a day trip, or a couple of days if you include the rest day before the race heads back into France, and it's unusual. It's an unusual situation for the Tour de France to cross the border like this, and I wonder how much they had Fabian Cancellara's retirement in mind and how it all stacked up that Bern was chosen for this stage finish. It certainly seems to be a happy coincidence, and maybe there was some manoeuvring behind the scenes to time everything perfectly so that we could all collectively raise our caps to Fabian Cancellara and his career.
No, it does seem like a bit of unbelievable serendipity that in his final years racing, his final Tour de France, they have a stage finishing in his hometown. But that's completely possible that it was arranged probably a couple of years ago. Maybe the mayor of Bern was talking with Fabian Cancellara and found out he was intending to retire, and perhaps then there was a proposal put to the ASO about them having a finish here, because that is it's a big investment from a town to do that. It's not like you just pick up the phone and call up ASO and ask to have a stage finish. There's lots of lobbying, and then there's a fee you have to pay to the ASO to have the right to do it, and then the logistics of it, of shutting down your town and city. So it's a big deal, and if that is the case, that Fabian Cancellara has been part of the reason for this, then it's an incredible honour for him.
I'll put you out of your misery. It's Ottawa, the capital of Canada.
Did you have to check that?
Well, to be perfectly honest, I knew, but I had 1% doubt, and since I have access to the World Wide Web, I did enter it into a popular search engine just to double check before I broadcast it to the nation. Thanks for pointing that out. As we look down at the Neuchâtel Lake.
What's interesting with this, the time gap has stabilised somewhat now, and I can tell this. There's one of the reasons that this chase has been furious, apart from the fact it's Tony Martin and one of the greatest time trialists we've ever seen off the fronts with a teammate, so they know he's not holding anything back. There was a stage in the Vuelta in 2013 where he was off the front on his own solo and did 170 kilometers solo, and as usual the peloton left him out, then reeled him in, but they reeled him in much quicker than normal, as I discussed before, because it is Tony Martin. But at 10 kilometers go they had him at 30 seconds and they just left him there, and then he took it back out 40 seconds, and then all of a sudden they panicked, and he held off the whole peloton those last 10 Ks with teams doing peel-offs after he'd been off the front for 170 Ks, and they caught him in the final 50 meters. It was heartbreaking. I remember watching it on TV and being on my knees in front of the TV willing him on, and that was probably one of the greatest performances I've ever seen, and I don't think anybody in the peloton has ever forgotten that he did that. He's the only bike rider in the world that was able to hold off a charging peloton well, he'd already done it for 170 kilometers, but then when they were in full flight lead-out mode, he held them off for 10 more kilometers.
I don't think you were alone, David, in falling to your knees and calling on the cycling gods to give this man his win. Got a brilliant individual stage, though, didn't he, on the Tour de France when he attacked a breakaway and held the whole chase off. 2014. Tony Martin, as we look down on Le Château de Gorgier, and once again the architecture is changing all the while, and these very, very tall spiky turrets are a real feature of the Bern skyline as well. I'm sure spiky isn't the correct architectural term, but you get my drift. Very, very distinctive. And quite different as well. You know you're in Switzerland now. So Tony Martin is wearing the full aero helmet and the skin suit. And is that really, I mean, is that just, is it really effective? What kind of difference does it make, and why do riders choose to wear those that different type of equipment?
Well, it does make a big difference. You can see this is a prime example. Julian Alaphilippe is in the very standard wear. You see there his jersey, the shorts, the non-aero helmet, even the bike is a fairly standard. I use that in the most respectful way, but that's a bike and setup you could use for a big mountain stage. Whereas you look at Tony Martin, his whole bike, he's got the super aero bike, one of the latest generation. He's got the speed skin suit on, he's got the aero helmet, and even the slightly bigger deep section wheels. So he set out today knowing he was going to be riding into the wind a lot, and because it does make a big difference. Now, if you're sitting in the peloton on the wheels, it doesn't make such a big difference, and it is quite uncomfortable. Those bikes are stiffer, they handle slightly differently. The speed suit, skin suit is much more compressive and not quite doesn't quite have the pockets, the same layout, and even it just feels slightly constrictive, if you like. But if you take that into account and then use it for what it's made for, it really does make a big difference. Same with the bikes, it's huge, but again, it's each rider has their particular needs and use their equipment accordingly.
That's the Chateau de Colombier, nothing to do with the Grand Colombier, over which we went twice yesterday. The Lacet du Colombier and the Grand Colombier. In that fascinating stage yesterday that produced a wonderful battle for the stage result involving Julien Alaphilippe, but in which the GC race was absolutely snuffed out by Team Sky. Talking of which, that was the man who did all the work as well, Wout Poels. Just an exceptional ride from him all the way over the last two climbs. Wout Poels neutralising everything and even leading Chris Froome out to sprint over the line in that GC group.
Yeah, and I was speaking to somebody yesterday who'd had been having a chat with Alejandro Valverde, who was saying that when Wout Poels is on the front, he's riding so hard that it's impossible for them to attack off it. They're all at their capacity. So it goes to show when he's riding on the front, he's setting a pace that is the maximal race pace that they can do. There's only maybe one rider that can move off that, and that is their teammate Chris Froome.
Yeah, the headline of L'Equipe said this morning that Chris Froome is sans rival. No one can match him at the moment, and certainly that's been the case. Possibly only Wout Poels can match him, and he's on the same team. An exceptional rider, and really he's blossomed, hasn't he? Because he was signed from a relatively low-ranking team. I think he was with Top Sport Flandern, wasn't he, before he joined Team Sky, or was that another team in between?
Vacances Soleil, I think.
Vacances Soleil, as it was, yeah.
I think he was involved in that horrific crash in 2012 as well, where he punctured his lung and was out. If I remember correctly, it was horrible what he went through. My whole team was wiped out. I still got the scars from that crash. But he came out worse than anybody and was hospitalised for months, I think. But he's come back now, and he also, not only apart from his Super Domestique, won Liège-Bastogne-Liège this year, which Team Sky had been chasing their monument, which is what we call those bike races, the oldest bike races in the world, the one days, and they got close a few times but never done it. And it was Wout Poels that actually did it this year at Liège-Bastogne-Liège and got that monkey off their back, if you like. So he really is. He's been a fantastic investment for the team, and it's been not only good for the team, it's been good for him as well.
Very early on in his Sky career as well, he went on a bonding session down to South Africa where Chris Froome spends his winters, so those two riders know each other extremely well. Chateau de Colombier, that's the scene. The peloton snaking its way past it. 3 minutes and 3 seconds, the constant advantage for the pair up front. Welcome back. Tony Martin and Julien Alaphilippe still have their 3-minute lead, more or less intact, and the kilometres are beginning to tick down. 55.3k to go. A number of teams working hard to bring these two exceptional riders back. It's a move of great panache, and we're enjoying it while it lasts, and there's no immediate sign of it ending anytime soon. As we look down at the lake of Neuchâtel, I think we have on the phone another director sportif to enlighten us about what's going on the road today, and it's Matt White from Orica Bike Exchange. Matt, can you hear us?
Yeah, good. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much for joining us again. Now, there's a number of teams working, including BMC, Tinkoff, Direct Energie, Fortuneo. They're all working to try and get these two back. You haven't sent anyone up there just yet, but in Michael Matthews, you've got a guy who can win the stage today.
Yeah, I think we have got a good chance. I think today was going to go either two ways. Either a big breakaway went from the start, because there is a lot of teams who haven't got a stage win here, but the sprinters teams really did control the start of the race today, and yeah, we've got a chance with Michael, and it should be a good one.
What about the last few days? How's everyone handling looking after Adam and how he's doing? I mean, he's staying cool and in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, look, it always lifts the team when you've got a guy who's performing at this level, And we've got a lot of experienced guys in this team, but obviously riding GC at the Tour de France is new to most of these guys. But they've certainly raised the bar, and Adam's getting well supported throughout the day.
So how do you feel? Have you seen the finish before? I mean, I rode it this morning, and it bears a striking resemblance to the Amstel finish, but with a little bit of a cobbled section before. And I think if it was just a cobble climb or that final 800 metres, neither of those would have made a difference. But the two combined are going to make it into a proper classic finish. Is that what you guys are expecting?
Yeah, definitely. And look, they've used this final before in the Tour of Switzerland. So we've had 4 or 5 of our guys have actually raced on this circuit. It's a little bit different run-in, but they do know the climb, and it is a tough one. So I agree, Dave. I think it's going to be a great one, obviously, for Peter Sagan, but half the Tour de France is. Greg Van Avermaet and Michael Matthews. I'm not sure Alejandro Valverde might even have a go today. I know he's up there on GC, but he hasn't won a stage, and it's a stage that suits him. So it's going to be a very interesting battle today.
Can I throw another name into the hat? And it's another Michael, and you've got him on your team, and he's Swiss. And we haven't seen a great deal of him so far on this tour, but Michael Albertini, I like the thought of him today in this stage as well.
Yeah, look, we actually just having a chat with Michael back at the car, and he's not at the condition that we've seen him in the past. He's going okay, but he's not the normal Michael Albertini that we see in Switzerland. Maybe if the whole Tour de France in Switzerland, it might be different. But Michael will be 100% committed to Michael Matthews in the final today.
Oh, well, at least thanks for that, actually, Matt. That clears one name up. We can strike him off our list, and at least we understand what his duty is today. So, yeah, good luck with that. I mean, how long do you think these guys will be out there before we reel them in? 2:44 their advantage at the moment, and we're heading down to 50k to go. When do you anticipate the catch?
Yeah, look, when it's the world versus Tony Martin, anything can happen. But I would think inside the last 10 kilometres with Tony.
It could be tight. We'll look forward to it, Matt. Thanks very much. You need to get back to your job. We really appreciate your time. Good luck on the rest of the race.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys.
See you, Matt.
Yeah, that was interesting. And, well, Michael Albertini is not a candidate. And that's about all we know because, as he says, there are so many different riders. And Alejandro Valverde is a very interesting name we haven't really discussed.
No, Valverde, again, is definitely the sort of finish that you would expect him to shine on. But at the same time, he's playing GC as well. He's right up there in GC, and often when you're in that position, it sucks a lot of your energy and motivation for a finish like this. It's very hard to switch from a GC state of mind to a sprint finish state of mind. So Michael Matthews and those guys, even Cancellara, Stuyven, Navadauskas, Van Avermaet, Sagan, they're all in today. They've got such commitment for this finish, and they'll be racing so aggressively for it. To then slip in there as a GC and try and match them, it's hard, and very few riders, even Alejandro Valverde, will find that difficult. But if it all unfolds for him perfectly, there's no reason why he can't win it. But I doubt he'll be up there with the absolute commitment that some of those other riders will.
2:36, no doubting the commitment of the Etixx Quick-Step pair. Half their advantage has gone. They've been out there an awfully long time. We understand they might have even attacked at 10k, something like that. So a 209-kilometre stage. Obviously that was before live television coverage joined the race, so we didn't see any of that early part of the race, but they've been out there a frighteningly long time, and Alaphilippe just rocking and rolling a little bit and getting onto the wheel of Tony Martin. The last Swiss rider, we understand, to have won a stage in Switzerland of the Tour de France, it happened in 1952, was a certain Walter Diggelmann from Zurich. Track rider he was. I think his greatest achievements apart from that were in the 6-day meetings over in the United States of America, where he won the 6 days of Chicago. What an occasion that must have been. I'd love to have seen that in 1948. And the 6 days of New York in 1949, presumably in Madison Square Gardens, where the venue that gave its name to the Madison.
No, we forget just how big it was back in those days. That was a big circuit, and the US was one of the favourite locations for the races and the organisers.
Yep, that's track racing, this is road racing, and this man is the best in the world at the moment. That's why he's the world champion. Is it going to be his day today? Welcome back. 2 minutes and 6 seconds. That's all now that Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe have over the peloton. But I say all, that is remarkable in itself, because the peloton has not had a day off or anything like today. They have been chasing with intent, featuring a number of teams, 4, 5 teams at various different points, most notably BMC working for Greg van Avermaet, and they have been full on in pursuit of Alaphilippe and Tony Martin, who've made it at worst uncomfortable for the chase, and at best still have an outside chance of holding them off. Tony Martin down in time trial mode, Alaphilippe tucked in behind him, a 2-minute advantage. It was up to over 5 minutes, and then it started to come down quite quickly, but they've held their advantage, and they've held it under 50k to go. We're at 45.6 kilometres, and in 4k time there'll be an intermediate sprint. Absolutely no prospect of these men contesting and trying to work against each other for the sprint, but there are plenty of points available in the green jersey competition further behind, because only 2 riders are up the road, so 15 points available for Peter Sagan and the rest, if that's what they fancy doing. So we might have a decent sprint on our hands 2 minutes further down the road.
This has been a very hard day. They averaged almost 50 kilometers an hour in the first hour, and that most of that was spent chasing Tony Martin and Alaphilippe. So we can see that the peloton, this has not been an easy transition day. And as Matt White had said, this stage was going to go 2 ways. It was either going to be a big break, as we often see in these transitional stages, and them fighting out the win, and the peloton coming back around 10 minutes, which is normally how that situation unfolds. But instead, which I don't think anybody would have called, we've ended up in this situation where it's 2 teammates, one of which a former world champion and one, no doubt, a future world champion, Alaphilippe, who are up there driving it in a 2-up time trial, and that's forced the peloton to be in a high-speed pursuit all day. So it's ended up being a challenging day for everybody. As you can see, just the peloton is all elongated, strung out. That's a clear sign that it's going at a high speed, and we've almost seen it unchanged though from since we've had images. It's just been in that long line. So that's what it takes to bring back Tony Martin.
2-up time trial of about 150 kilometres so far. They've got 3.2k to go until the intermediate sprint, as we pass through Switzerland en route to the Swiss capital of Bern, and a fascinating finale full of twists, turns, ramps, little climbs. Cobbles feature, I think, for the first time on this Tour de France. Can't recall seeing any cobbles on any other part unless they've eluded my attention.
No, it's definitely one of the more interesting finishes, and it's quite good, because it does motivate a lot of the teams. Otherwise, Greg van Avermaet and those type of riders, they might have looked to go in the break, but when they saw Alaphilippe and Tony Martin go, I'm sure they were relieved, because then they knew that Marcel Kittel shaking his head for some reason. I don't think he's having a fun day. His 2 teammates are making his day hell by the looks of it.
Well, what is interesting is that Marcel Kittel doesn't appear to be at the front of the bunch or anywhere near it, so he doesn't look as though he's going to be... No, he's up
I know what's happening here. His 2 teammates are in front to, like, let's move up. So as he's going now, and he was shaking his head going, no, it's too fast, it's too hard. So now he's moving up a bit as he just gets his breath back. But that was a classic. His teammates are trying to help him, and he's like, just leave me here.
Well, a peloton of that size is all strung out the way it is, David. That's hundreds of metres that you've got to make up, and moving at that kind of speed, that's just an absurd effort to contemplate if you're right at the back.
No, it's very hard, because I mean the peloton's going over 50 kilometres an hour, so you're going to have to, what you do is you pull out, you do little spurts of maybe move up 10 riders, slot back in again, and you take your time. Or you hope that when you've come back through the convoy, you can slingshot yourself out of the slipstream of a car at about 60 kilometres an hour and just carry that for as far as you can. Because the most difficult bit is the acceleration up to speed, and that's where you burn all the energy. So you just kind of dip in and out and hope that if it bunches up a bit, you swing out and just dive bomb up places.
The German pain machine, Tony Martin. Very often on the Tour de France these days, he'll identify one stage and he'll make everybody hurt in the race. And Julian Alaphilippe still riding with fire in his belly, absolutely livid with his misfortune when he thought he had a stage win right in the palm of his hand. It was snatched away from him with a mechanical.
There are a few riders where you can really see their personality by their cycling style, and Alaphilippe is one of those. You can almost read his emotions by the way he's riding. And yesterday we saw it, just how angry he was. He was jumping around. He looked so agitated in that once he was coming back after that mechanical. We also saw at Dauphiné, there's Steve Cummings in the centre of the picture, so they're obviously looking after Edvald Boasson today, and Steve Cummings is up there contributing. And I think we know why, because it is Mandela Days. It's one of the most important days of the year for that team, and even Stephen Cummings is up there contributing.
Which isn't his accustomed position. In fact, the only glimpse we've had of Mark Cavendish so far today was when the motorbike at the back of the peloton picked him out briefly in the early kilometres of today's stage, and I don't think that Mark Cavendish, reading into that situation, has identified today really realistically as a possibility for him, but you never know. What we don't know is whether Mark Cavendish is interested in the green jersey points at this intermediate sprint that looms large at 41.5 kilometres to go, because he sits in second place in the green jersey competition, 278 points, but Peter Sagan has an almost impregnable lead of 340 points. That said, and touch wood and cross fingers, and no one would wish this on Peter Sagan, but should anything happen, it's a bike race. If you're sitting in second place in the green jersey, and if for whatever reason Sagan is no longer able to continue the race, you're the green jersey. So it's still kind of matters as an insurance policy in the race.
No, completely, and it'll be a simple lack of professionalism if they were just to sit up and not take any points. And Mark Cavendish is nothing if not professional, and he'll be up there, and we've seen it since the first stage. He'll be present in the sprints, but he won't actually sprint them out. So I don't know what these two are discussing.
But you know, it's the first time I've actually seen them talk to each other. They've been just working in synchronicity. Tony Martin doing, as you would expect, the vast majority of the work, occasionally slipping in behind Julian Alaphilippe and taking his wheel to allow himself a couple of minutes respite. But now they're side by side, and they are talking. I wonder if Tony Martin's just saying, I think I can't go on much longer, because it wouldn't be unreasonable. And I wonder if this is what you're seeing now, the beginning of the end of this effort.
No, they will make a decision on how they're going to ride this. They can see that all of a sudden the time gap's coming down much quicker. It's taken probably an hour for it to go from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden from 2 minutes to 1 minute 30 it's happened in the last few Ks. So that is a sign of them becoming fatigued, as you'd expect, but also maybe the losing the spirit a little bit.
Demoralised.
Exactly.
Tinkoff are over the front of the peloton now with a couple of riders. There's the green jersey in about 7th place, and Mark Cavendish is slipped in behind him in the white jersey of Dimension Data. Brian Coquard too, he's a player in the green jersey competition, sitting in 4th place as things stand. He's interested in taking points here. The only big name player who's not bothered, well, in fact there's two of them. Andre Greipel's not visible at the moment, and certainly Marcel Kittel, last time we saw him, was right at the back of the peloton. So it looks like it's going to be Sagan, Cavendish and Coquard. And it won't be long before they reach the intermediate sprint. There we go. Just a couple of 100 metres to go for the chase. What's going to happen now? Conventionally, you would expect Sagan to take maximum points here and Cavendish to roll in about 3rd place, possibly 2nd place in this sprint for 3rd place. Just conserving his position and not trying to lose too much time. And yeah, it's not really contested, is it?
No, you can see that. That's just respect for each other. It's very much what you were saying. Regards is they're just doing it almost because that's their job. They know Peter Sagan is that jersey is almost guaranteed his now, apart from an injury or an accident. But look here, look, even Brian Coquard behind Mark Cavendish, he's not even going to try and get any points. They were just very mutual respect, and let's just do this because we have to, and the finish is much more important.
Well, in the same way that there is a general sentiment at the moment that Team Sky have the yellow jersey under control, the green jersey of Peter Sagan looks impregnable. There's our first glimpse of Bern, the Swiss capital. Quite beautiful it is, glittering in the sunshine. That's going to provide the fascinating finale to today's stage when they hit the cobbles and the climbs still to come. Welcome back. 35.6 kilometres remaining, and they're going to be fascinating, and they are bound to be fast. And there is a sense now that the catch could well be imminent. It's been a wonderful day out for Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe. I'm sure they agree at this point as the stars start to go out one by one in front of their eyes. It's been a full-on effort, and it's been a display of real aggression and pure panache. Hats off to Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe, but I think you can even read it from the body language now, especially with Alaphilippe doing his turn on the front. they probably sense that their day is done. So it's over to you imminently, I think, the rest of the race. And there are so many teams, there's so many permutations. And one of them is celebrating a very important day today, the South African team Dimension Data. And I'm delighted to say that Doug Ryder, the man who runs the team, has joined us for a few minutes. Doug, it's a massively important day for your team today, isn't it? Just explain why.
No, it is important. I mean, Mandela Day is a special day. Madiba is a special person. You know, he united our country and became an amazing ambassador for peace and and everything that's related to that. So he's an incredible person, and it's a fantastic day for us because last year when we were Africa's first ever team in the Tour de France, we won our first Tour de France stage on his birthday today. A year ago, Madiba Day, and so this day and that stage will always be special to our hearts and in this team's history, and also obviously to Steve Cummings. So this is a very special day for us. So today is another opportunity for us to potentially do something, and you can see with Steve Cummings is on the front and he's pacing really, really hard. It's a stage that we focused on Edvald Boasson Hagen with the cobbled climb at the end. Very, I believe, a strong classic rider finish. Maybe Dave's got another conversation around that, but it's a really good stage for the classic riders, I think, today, and Cancellara particularly. It's near his hometown, so we know exactly what we want to do, and hopefully we can get there with Edvald today.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's not a day for Cav as far as you're concerned, and reading into what you know about how the team's riding today.
Absolutely. I mean, as a team, we are incredibly professional and incredibly focused, and do so many recce's of all the major significant stages, especially the ones that we believe we can make an impact on. And if you can imagine, every year now that the Tour de France happens, it will always happen through Madiba's birthday. So that's kind of the stage that we focus on first and look at first, and then decide which rider could potentially do something on that stage. And it was a stage that that we found and felt was too hard for Mark, and that we would focus obviously for Edvald.
Talking about the man who won last year on and who we are seeing now working interestingly towards the front here, Steve Cummings, double stage winner. There he is, a little glimpse of the white and black jersey. 2 stage wins now, and that famous victory, as you said, last year on Mandela Day. To what extent is he an asset, and to what extent is he just someone you kind of put up with his idiosyncrasies? Because when he won that brilliant stage in Lac de Péole, the cameras caught this wonderful moment where he collapsed on top of you, and he virtually sobbed at you. I'm sorry I do this, and I'm sorry I do that, and I know I'm a bit of a thing and I don't contribute. I mean, have you always known that you just have to treat Steve Cummings differently?
Well, I mean, the uniqueness about our team is that we look at every individual and their strengths, and I think that's what makes Steve Steve. So we embraced that and accepted that. And if you look at him now, he's won 4 World Tour races this year in stage races. So he's a phenomenal contributor to the team, just in terms of his his mentorship and his focus. But unbelievable how he has the ability to, when he wants to do something, to pull it off. And for Steve to ride in the front today, knowing how important and how big this stage was for him last year, having won a stage already in this year's Tour de France, knowing how badly Edvald wants to win a stage, and committing 150% for Edvald just shows his character and the value that he brings to us. And he's an incredible person.
How has the reception been, Doug, in Africa to all the success?
Well, I mean, we can't count it, actually. It's this team punches way above its weight. It's such a special team, and the amount of interest in this team is off the charts, and that's the power of the Tour de France. If I think it's a bit like in British cycling as well. A team races 250 race days a year, but if you don't do something in the Tour de France, are you a real team? And unfortunately, that's in South Africa too. They don't realize that by the time we rode our first Tour de France last year, we had raced over 500 race days at this level of cycling. And they just think, oh, you're going to race for 21 days in France. Like, how hard can that be? And I'm like, well, actually, the preparation and the pre-work is pretty damn hard. So it's incredible, and it's massive exposure for us in South Africa. So super excited for our new sponsors and this team's future.
Doug, I'm sure there'll be people at home applauding you, but also wondering in the backs of their minds, Steve Cummings and Mark Cavendish, your winners on this Tour de France, are from the Wirral and the Isle of Man, respectively. So they're African by trade team only in that sense. How many years away are we from seeing a real impact from this talented crop of Eritreans, Ethiopians and Rwandan cyclists? Those are the 3, if you like, from the black African cycling community. Those are the 3 countries we're looking to produce a champion.
I mean, we've said that the ultimate goal is to get an African rider of colour and on the podium in a Grand Tour. And the African sports people have that endurance gene. If you look at endurance running, how African cycling or how African running is dominated in that form of sport. And we believe in the next 3 to 5 years that there should be an African rider of colour on the podium in a Grand Tour. And that's our goal and focus and what we're building towards. And we'll continue to race as the team we are, which is support every single rider in the team and give them an opportunity to win until we get that African rider that is able to sustain a 3-week stage race and require the support to stand on a podium. But I do believe it's imminent, and that's 3 to 5 years away.
Okay, and just finally, today is all about the Norwegian road race champion for you. When's he going to make his move? How's he? You've had a look, presumably, at the run-in. You know about the little cobbled climb and then that drag afterwards after they cross the river. Where does he go?
Well, who wins today will take it long, or hang on to someone that will take it long. So it'll be a Cancellara, it'll be a Valverde, it'll be a Christoph who will ride off someone else because he doesn't normally go long, and Michael Matthews, all of those kind of guys. It's a special stage for those kind of riders, I believe, and Greg van Avermaet as well. But Eddie will go long. He'll probably go with a K to go, get over the climb, and then hit it out hard while everybody's trying to take a breather before the sprint. So let's hopefully he's in the right position to do that, and doesn't have to close a big gap. But I think it's going to be flat out from 3K to go.
It's been flat out all the way so far. Many thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Congratulations on your wonderful tour so far. 4 stage victories for Mark Cavendish and 1 for Steve Cummings. It is truly exceptional. And there we are, a South African flag right on cue on Mandela Day to wave you off. Cheers, Doug.
Thank you.
Good luck with the rest of it. Thanks very much indeed. 30.8k to go. 52 seconds. So they're still hanging out there. They've had about 20 seconds shaved off their advantage since we've been talking to Doug Ryder. 51 seconds to go, and the suffering goes on for these two. They certainly haven't given up, David, and they're still riding hard.
No, they may as well make it as hard as possible for the peloton. They've already suffered all day. They may as well make it suffer for the peloton. If they sit up now, it sort of negates all the work they've done. They may as well try and take it as long as they can. It also helps the teammates, and because the fact they have 2 teammates up the road riding means that they can sit on everything, and they're given really a free ride. So the moment they come back, then people will ask Etixx Quick-Step to contribute to things again.
Somewhere in that pack lurks Fabian Cancellara in the colours of Trek Segafredo. His team have been pretty invisible. He's the big man of the moment, though, as they head towards Bern, where he's from. A number of other teams have showed their cards, though. BMC clearly fancy Greg van Avermaet's chances. Tinkoff, of course, fancy Peter Sagan's chances, because Peter Sagan fancies Peter Sagan's chances on every race. Every day he pins a number to his back and gets on a bike. But they're not the only teams. There are so many different candidates today. How would Spartacus play this? Where do you think that Cancellara would be best suited? Would it be that cobbled climb, David, with 2.5 kilometres to go, or does he wait until that long drag that leads you up to the Flamme Rouge?
I think he's going to have to wait. He'll hope that, and actually his team would have to hit it out to the bottom on the cobblestones. You'd expect Cancellara to sit there and not, if he wants to win this, which obviously he does. He's a very astute rider, and he won't just race for panache and flamboyance. He'll make a cold and calculated move, and if he wants to do that, it has to be over the top. At that moment, just when Doug Ryder was implying that was the best time for Burton Hagen, well, that's the best time for Cancellara as well, because everyone's over their limit at that point. They've just survived to the top of it, and in that little lull, that's when you get the gap if you're strong enough.
Étoile Mondiale have got Alexis Villamoz, who had a really hard day out in the breakaway yesterday, but he might be suited to today's finish. And their rangy sprinter Sam Dumoulin to consider, who's featured in bunch sprints so far, but he climbs. So they've got a couple of different weapons at their disposal. Astana are moving themselves closer to the front, but today's not a day for Astana, unless, of course, Vincenzo Nibali fancies it, and he might go long. Yeah. Couldn't rule that out.
And you can see how the chase isn't slowing down, even though they can see them now, they know they're caught. Well, actually, I think they won't believe they've caught them until they're actually got them back in the peloton. They're not going to leave them sitting out there at 45 seconds or less than a minute, because they just don't trust Tony Martin.
Well, they're on the only categorised climb of the day. They go over the top of it. Well, they're just approaching it, I should say. They start to climb at 26.7k, and they go over the top of the Côte de Mühleberg. That's a mixture of languages, Bernese, German and French, with 25.5 kilometres remaining. It's a Cat 4 climb, and there's one mountain point of huge irrelevance at the top of it. 1.2 kilometres of climbing at an average gradient of 4.8%, so it's barely a climb at all, and it's just really there for the form book. That said, today's stage has been far from flat, David, and the running certainly isn't either.
No, it has been your classic, typical rolling day. It's just constantly, well, exactly that, rolling. But the nice thing is as well, is in Switzerland the roads are so smooth and fast. As the two of them are just having a laugh now. They're realising it's over and embracing the fact that it has been a good day out.
Well, I hope that Tony Martin has enjoyed his training ride flat out, and I hope that Julien Alaphilippe has calmed down a bit, because that might have been the point of today. He's got all that out of his system now, the frustration of yesterday, and it's good to see them smiling. The pain faces have melted away, and they can reflect with pride on their ride today. People will remember that, the day those two got up the road. It's an unusual sight on the Tour de France to see two teammates, the only riders in a two-up time trial, forming the breakaway. Still got 42 seconds, so they're not. The catch is not right on their necks.
Well, it might stabilise a little bit now if the peloton does decide that they can bring it back at will, and they might be realising that that's a possibility now. I mean, it's been a big chase, and it's been 5 teams at times, 6 teams at times contributing to that chase. We can see there it's BMC, Fortuna, Vital Concept, Dimension Data, Tinkoff. So it's. That's what it's taken to bring them back, and there's still 4 or 5 riders riding, so the peloton really is in the driving seat right now, and I think we can see Tony Martin and Alaphilippe have resigned themselves to their fate now, and but they'll just keep pushing it on for a bit, and even when they get to the top of this climb, it carries on going up for 3 or 4 Ks in a false flat manner, so it's far from done yet.
Not cooked, just roasting away nicely in the baking heat here in the foothills of the Swiss Alps. Still they ride, and still Tony Martin leads them on. It would be a highly unusual Tour de France if Tony Martin were to come away with nothing except huge honour as a domestique, but that's the situation so far. No stage wins for Tony Martin, no yellow jersey as he wore last year, just. And then of course he crashed out. But it might well end up a little bit fruitless for Tony Martin this year in terms of his normal haul that he takes away from the Tour. But Julien Alaphilippe clearly wants to make his mark on this race. Well, he already has, but he wants to go one better and get himself a first stage win.
Yeah, and it's very impressive, and that everyone will take note of the fact that he was in that breakaway yesterday, and on stage 15 of the Tour de France, so you're deep into it, and it was clear that he should have been there without the mechanical with Majka and Pantano, and fighting out the win, which probably would have been closely fought with Pantano, because Alaphilippe is very fast sprinter. There's very few climbers that can sprint as well as he can. But then to do that, have that big day, have that massive disappointment, then come out today and do a ride like this with Tony Martin, you know, everyone's going to respect that massively, and it's going to back up the belief that everybody has that he's going to be one of the biggest names in cycling for the next decade, as he sits up and lets Tony Martin go now.
Yeah, that's the end for Julien Alaphilippe, it looks like, and Tony Martin just ploughs on. Doesn't really know how to stop. Big gear on the Côte de Mühleberg.
That's what happened to Dave Zabriskie and Dave Zabriskie now peeled off and hidden in the driveway.
You're telling us earlier about your two-man adventure back in the days of Garmin on the Vuelta in the company of Dave Zabriskie. And he hid from the peloton for shame. Julien Alaphilippe has absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. And I'm sure Zabriskie, if you're watching, he didn't on the day either. Tony Martin just doesn't want to stop. Still enjoying himself. Alaphilippe has a younger brother, you know, who rides for the army team. And the directeur sportif of his team is a certain Jimmy Casper, who you may remember from the Tour de France, a sprinter, who normally on the Tour de France drives the neutral refreshment motorbike, I think, Jimmy Casper, but he's not allowed to anymore because he is no longer impartial. He's a directeur sportif on another team, and so therefore he might be deemed to have his favourites in the peloton to look after. So instead he's working the hospitality tents.
Steve Cummings setting the pace now, so he's getting his work done now. You'd have thought that Steve, with the power he has, he'd have been perfect rider to set up Edvald Boasson into the climb, but obviously he's wanting to contribute now.
So they've been out there an enormously long time, but Julien Alaphilippe is the first of that dynamic duo to be swept up by the peloton, and Tony Martin continues all on his own. He's got a 21-second lead, which he will just hold on to for as long as he can by the looks of it. No signs of weakness yet from Tony Martin, just a slow, diminishing return in every pedal stroke. I suppose you can put it like that, as the engine contracts somewhat. Chris Boardman described the process of cycling and running and all these endurance sports once famously to me as being like an engine that its fibres and its capacity just diminishes and contracts with each passing minute and hour, and eventually you want to try and produce the same result with a smaller and smaller and smaller engine, and that's pretty much what's happening to Tony Martin now. Hence the reason he will be caught, just a question of when. Grabs a water bottle from one of his team helpers at the side of the road, one final swig before the game is emphatically up, and over the climb they go. Julien Alaphilippe now battling just to remain in contention with the rest of the peloton. He might well be rolling in the last 25 kilometres all on his own. But that's a happier Julien Alaphilippe than we saw yesterday.
I think that's an exhausted Julien Alaphilippe. That's what happens when you go do a 2-up time trial with Tony Martin for 150 kilometres.
Well, the word epic gets overused in cycling, but that's not far off epic what they just did there. A first glimpse of Rafa Majka, who is outthought and outridden by the man just 5 or 6 bikes in front of him now, who's doing some work on the front, Jarlinson Pantano. So, huge day out for Pantano yesterday, and a great result for I Am Cycling, who, let's not forget, are a Swiss team, and is showing his colours. And there's another man who's struggling today and has given up the ghost pretty much, and that's Marcel Kittel. So if your money was on Kittel for the win, you've done your money. Never really suited him today, Marcel Kittel. Ilio Kaiser joins him for company, and those two will just ride in on their own at the back of the course, detached from the peloton.
Well, it's interesting to see Marcel Kittel suffering that much on what was only a Cat 4 climb.
It looks like Kaiser's trying to get it back in, so they haven't sat up, have they?
No, they haven't. No, Kaiser's trying to get it back in because he doesn't want to ride 25 Ks on his own, so it'll just be more tiring. You're best to dig a little deeper now, trying to hang on to the peloton for as long as you can, because it will be infinitely easier being on the wheels and faster. Otherwise you're just out there slogging on your own, burning more energy and losing more time.
Tony Martin just still turning the pedals over. Yeah, there's Pantano for I Am Cycling. And that's a remarkable ride, actually, to be right on the front and turning things around. Yesterday's hero, today's domestique. That's how it works on Grand Tours. So as Alaphilippe goes backwards, Marcel Kittel and Ilio Kaiser try to maintain contact with the peloton. Etixx Quick-Step have been all over the front, and they're now all over the back of the bike race, but still they have the leader. Tony Martin hasn't been caught yet. He's got 12 seconds advantage over a Chase, which has him right in their sights.
So just as Alaphilippe was giving up, looking forward to riding in slowly to the finish, he's seen 2 of his teammates go by and feels obliged to latch on with them. There's no easy escape.
9 seconds now, that's all that Tony Martin has. 22.9 kilometres remaining, and he's almost he's found a supernaturally large gear, and he's just turning his legs ever so slowly now and just holding them off for as long as he can. But some of the urgency and the speed, frankly, in that Chase has just been knocked out of it, because they know exactly where Martin is now. They can see him. Julien Alaphilippe, who was with him, has now got Ilio Kaiser for company, and Marcel Kittel. There's an attack from Astana. They have animated things. They've seen that Martin is about to be caught, and the attacks have started to come, and Steve Cummings is the rider on the front for Dimension Data, trying to bring them across, and there's a reaction from Direct Energy.
It's talked Vauclair. So Vauclair's up there covering that move. So he's probably just more marking for Brian Coquard than intentionally going on the attack.
Well, that acceleration has just swept up Tony Martin, so it's the end of the day for Tony Martin. Doff your cap to him. What a great attack and what a great breakaway that was. And now it's getting very interesting. So they've caught them with 22.2k to go, and now the front end of the bike race, as Voeckler moves to the front, is exposed to precisely this. Riders trying to take it long and go long and launch a surprise attack.
And that was Voeckler just covering for his team and Brian Coquard. So the Astana rider goes, he jumps on his wheel, refuses to ride, and so the Astana rider, as you can see, gets frustrated and gives up the attack. And Direct Energie, because Direct Energie's main objective today is to make sure that Brian Coquard is in the situation to sprint out for the win.
Well, he's smiling in his graphic caption, but I think when the camera comes round, yeah, there we go, there's a smile and a wave too. And a thumbs up, and the traditional sign that he's spent.
And he's probably about to see three of his teammates come by, with Julian Alaphilippe dragging on Elio Kayser and Marcel Kittel, and realise he's got to start working again.
So Dimension Data, if you take out Thomas Voeckler from the equation, seem to have the strength in numbers at the front of the peloton. Vincenzo Nibali is there too, and that is the Ethics Quick-Step train that is...
And sure enough.
Well, yeah, Alaphilippe's gone. Kayser's moving Kittel past, and not even an exchange of glances between the two Germans, Kittel and Martin.
No, they wouldn't even ask for his help after the day out he's had.
Tony, you couldn't just, would you mind just jumping on the front of this?
But he must be thinking, seriously, what are you guys doing? I've been up the road to try and help you and make your lives easier, and you're off the back doing your own 2-up time trial.
Meanwhile, at the front, I think Nibali is paying a lot of attention at the front, and there's a rider from Lampre Merida who's gone to the left-hand side of the road, and he's using the motorbike a bit there just to spring clear, drafting on the back of the bike.
Rui Costa looks like it's a bit like Rui Costa.
Yeah, that's Rui Costa. Yeah,
ex-world champion. So
that is him. Yeah, dangerous move this, and someone might have to bring him back. You don't want to let Rui Costa get too far up the road. Long way out though, isn't it? 21.1 kilometres still to go, but the gap's going out.
And this is one of the reasons normally when you're in that chase, when you're chasing down the breakaway like those 2-up, you leave the catch as late as possible, because none of the riders really want to go when there's a break already up the road, especially in the final, because they don't want to enter into that futile, confusing chase. But the moment you bring it back and there's an empty road in front, everyone finds a fresh motivation, and it relaunches the race. So although they had to bring that back because they were worried about Tony Martin and Alaphilippe and the strength they have and the potential they have to actually make it to the line, they also have now opened themselves up to this situation. But the moment they brought back those two riders and Tony Martin, the race has been reignited.
Well, Rui Costa clearly highlighted this day and this stage in his road book. Maybe not at the beginning of the tour, but maybe yesterday, maybe last night, and thought, today I show myself.
And Elio Kayser and Marcel Kittel have given up now, so they're letting this go. They realise they can't bring it back, so to latch onto the back, and so it'll probably end up with, especially if they know Tony Martin and Alaphilippe are behind them, they may as well just all club together and ride in together, have a gentle half an hour or so spin in.
Through 20 kilometres, Rui Costa has sprung clear, and he's going to have to solo to victory. Nobody's going with him at the moment. They're just keeping him firmly in sight. Multiple stage winner on the Tour de France, of course, Rui Costa, and a dangerous rider. Someone at some point will have to take responsibility for bringing him back.
And it is Rui Costa in this situation would have much preferred some 2 or 3 riders to come with him when he launched, because on his own for 19Ks and with that difficult finish, it's a big ask.
Well, Thomas Voeckler moves to the front, and it's still Dimension Data, Direct Energie and BMC who have control of the front of the peloton, but not control of the front of the race. That, for the moment, belongs to Lampre Merida and the former world champion Rui Costa, out, up front and on his own. Welcome back. Switzerland celebrates the arrival of the Tour de France into Bern, into its capital, into the heart of Cancellara country, with Rui Costa from Portugal and Lampre Merida off the front, but you sense for not very much longer. His advantage now only 4 seconds as Voeckler re-establishes order for Direct Energie at the front. Steve Cummings on his wheel and BMC sharing the work. A first showing for Orica Bike Exchange with 3 riders on the front, one of whom is Swiss, Michael Albertini. He'll be on domestique duty today for the other Michael Matthews, looking for a second stage win on his Tour de France, which is all going his way at the moment. Getting the better of Peter Sagan is no mean feat, and Michael Matthews executed that stage win brilliantly from that group. Different kind of run-in today altogether, but one that is well within Michael Matthews' compass.
Yes, as we said, it's very much like the Amstel Gold race finish, where it has a climb, Valkenberg climb, and then the finish is about 1,500 meters after the summit, and if on a flat road. Well, this is very similar. Rohan Dennis, who's been working all day, Alex Howes, who was in one of the moves yesterday. We can see George Bennett as well. So those were the riders that were in that break yesterday, who are obviously paying the price for that today.
Yeah, some of these riders look absolutely exhausted, don't they? Just well, it's been hard all day, and if your legs aren't good, now's when it really starts to hurt. They just haven't been allowed a proper normal day off. That's Dylan van Baarle again, as you say, David, one of the riders who was in a breakaway yesterday. Which makes the riders who are capable of these repeated efforts and doing work at the front repeatedly so much more impressive, and it makes Julian Alaphilippe's ride today even more impressive in hindsight.
No, it does. If you're in the race and you know what effect it has on you day to day, then you can't help but be impressed by those riders that can do the repeated breakaway days. Peter Sagan can do it. Julian Alaphilippe obviously can do it, but there are very few and far between those types of riders. But the riders have to go for the mountains jersey. They have to be able to do that over and over again, like Danny Navarro, who's at the back. Yeah. He's been doing that.
The rider for Cofidis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 riders working for Greg Van Avermaet. 6 make that. So they've got virtually their whole team, or the riders that you expect. Of course, TJ Van Garderen and Richie Porte, the GC riders who you can see there, they won't be helping out today in terms of setting this up for Greg Van Avermaet. There's the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, a little bit isolated. Hasn't got the accustomed Sky train all around him, just one rider, a couple of wheels in front of him. Ramanas Navadauskas, he's an outsider and a dark horse to watch in the white jersey and the green helmet of Cannondale on the left-hand side of the road.
It's a very impressive ride by Rui Costa, because although we presume he'll be catched to even make a move like this in the Tour de France at this point in the race, it shows that he is on form, but he just hasn't been able to exploit it yet. So this will be good motivation for him. And Rui Costa at his best, you would have actually thought maybe a finish like today would have been quite good for him. He's very wily when it comes to tactics and very strong in those final moves, but obviously he didn't feel confident about his ability, so he's hit out earlier.
BMC's confidence is absolutely evident on the road. Team moving up on the left-hand side. That's Katusha. Alexander Kristoff is their sprinter, and he is a man who can get up these climbs. Remarkably, actually, but anyone who can win Milan-San Remo can get up climbs. Totally different kind of climbing, this, though. Not really comparable to that famous win that Alexander Kristoff took. Nonetheless, we know he can. He's not a rider who's going to suffer too much from the kind of short but hellishly hard climbs that they have to negotiate in the final 2 kilometres.
No, it's unlike Greipel, Kittel, Cavendish currently, because as Brian Holmes said when we spoke to him earlier, we've seen Mark Cavendish win harder finishes than this, but that was a few years ago when he really was at his peak. He's a slightly different rider now. But the riders like Kristoff, Edvald Boasson-Hagen, Sagan, as usual, Van Avermaet, they're capable of getting over climbs and still sprinting from a bunch.
So it's up and down, rolling, but mostly downhill now until they hit the river in Bern, and then they roll along the side of the river. And it's at that moment that they hit this cobbled section with about 2.5 kilometres to go. When they get to the cobbles, then with about, as I say, 2.5k to go, they turn left-handed up to the bridge, which is at a high level going over the river. They cross it actually in total 3 times the river today. Towards the finishing line, away from the finishing line, and then finally back over it again. So 3 different crossings.
Steve Cummings still leading the bunch, so he's been doing the vast majority of work for Dimension Data the last 25-30 Ks. And if we look, the team that's been doing the most the last 30 Ks is Direct Energie, then Tinkoff, BMC and Dimension Data. So those are the 4 teams that have been really concerned with the chase and are obviously extremely motivated for today's stage. Katusha as well, but they haven't been doing as much work. They've been playing quite a clever tactical game, and probably the most conspicuous by their absences has been Orica Bike Exchange, who probably do have, in my opinion, the rider most suited to this sort of finish, and it's Michael Matthews.
Yep, it's all in for Michael Matthews for Orica Bike Exchange. Lamprey Merida had a couple of riders at the front there, but they of course won't be doing any of the chasing because Rui Costa is still out on his own. 11 seconds, that's all he's got to play with though, so it's very, very respectable ride from Rui Costa, but appears to be fairly pointless given the chase coming up behind him and a number of different teams. We've got these big favourites who want to bring this all back. Positioning is going to be very, very important, isn't it, on these narrow roads when they get into these cobbled roads in the centre of Bern, essentially, the old medieval centre.
No, everything. I think they'll all know that 3 Ks to go, so 7 Ks from now. If the GC riders will want to be at the front to avoid being gapped, the racers who are going for the stage are going to need to be right at the front as well. So we're going to have that classic double train, double motivation, the GC teams and the stage teams battling out for positioning, because with just over 2.5 Ks to go on that cobbled section, they're going to have a hairpin turn, which is going to string it out, and so it's going to be entering normally that second phase of the climb in a long line, and so you want to be at the very front of that to avoid being caught out by gaps.
Rui Costa has less than 10 kilometres to go, but he has this lot bearing down on him as we head to the back of the peloton and see the red numbers and the polka dot jersey of Rafa Majka and Danny Navarro from Cofidis. But at the front of the race, so many different teams are trying to haul this man back in. He sprung clear with just under 20 kilometres to go, did Rui Costa, and he's still out there. So for 10k, he's been suffering into the wind on his own. Former world champion, the Portuguese rider from Lampre Merida, and this is in many ways a trademark Rui Costa move. A bit like Thomas Voeckler, he seizes his opportunity, he reads a race very well, and he knows when to go. Has he timed this correctly? Well, that would seem unlikely. 11 seconds, and the glance over his shoulder will confirm that the convoy is not too far behind. There they all are, the peloton bearing down on him. It's a question of when is he caught. Pretty soon they'll hit the banks of the River Aare in Bern, the capital, in whose outskirts now Rui Costa is leading the Tour de France.
And there's one rider we haven't mentioned and haven't seen much of for a while now, is Fabian Cancellara.
Yeah.
So if there's one person in his peloton who knows these roads better than anybody else, it's Fabian Cancellara, who comes from here. And I'd be very surprised if we don't see him attempt something.
Watch out for the white and black jerseys. Quite easy to confuse, actually, with the white and black jerseys of Dimension Data, but Cancellara is wearing the colours of Trek Segafredo, mostly white. Vincenzo Nibali is leading Fabio Aru up on the right-hand side of the road, just keeping him safe. Luke Rowe looking around to see where the yellow jersey of Chris Froome is. You can just catch a glimpse of the rider coming past us right now and shaking his head. He's a little bit out of position and doesn't appear too happy with where he is there, actually. So it's a bit of a stressful situation in the race right now as they try and catch Rui Costa. 7.7k to go. And once again he glances, and those little twists and turns play into his favour. That's what you want if you're out there, as you know very well, David, as a lone breakaway rider. When you tried to hold off the peloton on the streets of Barcelona, you had long, wide, straight avenues to try and defend your lead. What you really wanted was this.
Yeah, this, and then the perfect scenario is if it starts raining now. Because then whatever speed the peloton gets, it's forced to slow down to the same speed as you around each corner. So that's always the ideal scenario. Wet roads, windy street furniture, and then you stand a chance against a charging peloton.
Another team I noticed just moving further to the front end of the peloton was Team Giant Alpecin. They've got 3 riders sitting in about 10th, 11th and 12th position in the pace line, and they are in all likelihood riding for a seemingly rejuvenated John Degenkolb, who contested that bunch sprint final in the stage won by Mark Cavendish a couple of days ago. So it's good to see the German sprinter for Giant Alpecin back to his best, and if he is back to his best, watch out for him, because today would suit him just as well as it suits Michael Matthews and Peter Sagan. Degenkolb could be a factor. The Swiss capital is looking fantastic, as it does every day of the year. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, totally distinctive, built on that tongue of land as the River Aare meanders round it. Beautiful stage finish, and a nod to one of its most famous sons, Fabian Cancellara, who's yet to show his face at the front end of this race, but still 6.1k to go and all the difficulties ahead of us on the road.
See, Steve Cummings really is, he's barely come off the front the last few Ks, and I think he knows that this is his last effort. He's got till probably about 3 Ks to go, so another 3 Ks and then he'll pull off and hope that his teammate Edvald Boasson Hagen is placed well.
That tunnel, I tell you, is long, and they've just ripped through it. Now they're going to cross the river for the first time. They're heading towards the finishing line, but they will kick back on themselves and go through 90 degrees fairly soon. Rui Costa leads them through the tunnel and out onto the bridge. Steve Cummings pulls over, his job is done, and he has set a furiously high pace. They haven't got to Rui Costa yet, but they've got him right where they want him. And now, is that a rider going long? It's a Team Giant Alpecin rider, and John Degenkolb is sitting in, well, he's got one man in front of him, but they take control now, Giant Alpecin, off the front of the race.
Well, that's the perfect, if Tom Dumoulin's on a good day, then that's the perfect teammate for Degenkolb, because he can set an infernal pace the whole way up and try and keep it together and deter attacks.
It almost looked like, if that was Dumoulin on the front there, that he'd gone like slightly too hard at that point and opened up a bit too much of a gap, as it looks like I Am Cycling now have the front of the race, and Rui Costa is finally caught. So yeah, indeed, I Am Cycling with their big engines, with Martin Elmiger, Swiss rider, on the front. And BMC takes second string. Is that Lee Howard sitting in, just in third wheel?
Surprised to see Groenewegen there, up there, as we've not really seen much glimmers of form from him, and especially in a finish like this, and yet he's got two teammates in front of him. Michael Matthews, I think, is up there for Orica Bike Exchange. BMC are well placed for Greg van Avermaet. So it's all the usual suspects, the people we expect to be. As you can see, I think that's Michael Schaar looking up to see where Greg van Avermaet is, because there's no point in them starting to pick up the pace if he isn't placed well.
Here we are, they're on the River Road very shortly, and it flattens out, and it won't be long before they hit the cobbles. And it is interesting how, since we are in Switzerland, all the big Swiss domestiques are doing their turn. You just mentioned Michael Schaar for BMC. He's a Swiss rider, and Elmiger's doing his job for I Am Cycling as well. Yeah,
and I Am, obviously, this is probably one of the last times they'll race in Switzerland ever, and being a Swiss team, they'll have that added motivation.
They've crossed the river back towards the centre, and now they turn right-handed, and in less than a kilometre they'll hit the cobbled section, and then they'll begin to climb at about 2.5k to go. When it kicks up to the left.
And we can see with this windy finish how imperative it's been to be in the right place, being in the first 20 riders. There's Peter Sagan, two riders behind Edvald Boasson-Hagen. So they're going to sit there and they want to almost defend up here. Peter Sagan obviously could attack if he wanted to, but he knows he could also win. Look at the gaps opening. So that's from all that windy running and the speed they're going at. It's already creating gaps. That's why the yellow jersey needs to be up the front, and that's why anybody who's contesting the stage needs to be up there.
Switzerland recognising Nice and the tribulations that have beset the Tour de France and the country of France over the last few days. A nice gesture from the neighbouring country. Now Lotto Jumbo from the Netherlands have control of the front. They're on the cobbled section. They're not aggressive cobbles. Don't for a minute think that this is Paris-Roubaix, but they're going to be disruptive and they're going to hurt. Little section of tarmac, and then the cobbles begin again. And as you pointed out, there's Rui Costa just sitting up. The gaps are appearing all the way along the back, and the pace is being forced at the front, and it's making people suffer at the back. A BMC rider, is it, or Cofidis, off the front now?
Peter Sagan is in the perfect position there. He's managed to place himself where he needs to be. He's not going to have to make any spurts. And now this is where it goes up. It kicks up here. It's quite steep, and then they're going to have a switchback 180-degree turn at the top. So as you can see here, they're going to have to smash it up here, and whoever gets around that corner will get a breather. The people behind are going to have to keep pushing hard to avoid the acceleration. Peter Sagan in fourth place.
Yeah, that is a steep gradient. You can't get any sense of how steep that is from that helicopter shot, but believe me, that will have forced some sort of a selection, and naturally Peter Sagan hasn't been afflicted by that. He has, though. Brian Coquart, well, he won't be contesting the win today. A lot of work was done by Direct Energie for him today, and it's come to nothing. So there's a little bit of a gap there. Let's look for some of the favourites. There's Ramonas Navadauskas, who's made a move on the left-hand side of the road.
I think it's Sepp van Mark on the left who's moving up. So Ramonas Navadauskas, again, this is this perfect sort of thing. But once they come off this bridge, they're going to turn left off the cobblestones onto a big road that sweeps up to the left, and that's going to be 600 metres again of climbing.
Classic specialists moving to the front of this race, designed for them. Sepp van Marker, the Dutch rider for Lotto Jumbo, and he has with him Ramonas Navadauskas from Lithuania. Dimension Data still have a rider on their wheel, so they've made the junction. They're still there. On the right-hand side of the road, I think it's Warren Barguil working to set things up for John Degenkolb. Peter Sagan is there in the green jersey. Lee Howard is digging in, and so too is Michael Matthews and Alexander Kristoff. Nairo Quintana is still there as well, and Romain Bardet. So GC riders and possible stage winners. Now this drag goes on and on, all the way up to almost within the Flamme Rouge and the final kilometre.
I can't see the yellow jersey any there. No, I haven't seen the yellow jersey at the front here, so that's very rare for Chris Froome. There he is, right to the back of the group, and that's much further back than he'd like to be, so I wouldn't be surprised if we do see a spurt back up there. But this is perfect riding from Giant, because they want to keep this as steady as possible for Degenkolb. who's in third place on Peter Sagan's wheel. Now, this is where you got to watch. This is what Doug Ryder says. This is at the top here, where it lulls. That's where Edvald Boasson Hagen has to go.
Well, there you are looking at probably the distillation of the stage winners. Warren Barguil is simply trying to set things up and keep it as high as he possibly can for John Degenkolb, the rider in third position. He's sitting on the wheel of the green jersey. Now it flattens out, and through 1 kilometre they go, and it's going to be a long kilometre. It is wide, and it is flat, and it is hot, and there are the potential winners. Alexander Kristoff, the purest sprinter amongst them, is he most handily placed here.
So Warren Barguil, this is not such a good position Peter Sagan, but we've seen him handle before, because Warren Barguil is going to die. He's just on a massive amount of workload. Edvald Boasson Hagen, I think they're all so ripped on the rivet that they can't attack now, so they're all going to settle for the sprint. But Warren Barguil, his speed's going to drop, and at some point Peter Sagan's going to have to move, because you can see the bunch coming up. Fabian Cancellara coming up as well in the middle, so he's going to go for the sprint.
Fabian Cancellara, he can sprint as well. Fabian Cancellara, perhaps not quite as fast as Peter Sagan or Edvald Boasson Hagen, or for that matter Greg van Avermaet. All the big favourites, they are here. Who is going to open it up fast? Mark Cavendish has made the selection. He's in about 7th or 8th wheel. You can just about see the white helmet. That is a massive effort from the Manxman to make this selection. Alejandro Valverde leads things out. Sepp van Marker on his wheel. Alexander Kristoff opening up his sprint with the green jersey on him. Can Cavendish sprint? What position is he in? Now Cavendish is out of it. Lee Howard opens up on the right-hand side. It's Degenkolb, Sagan, Kristoff across the line. But I think it was either Sagan or Kristoff who got there first. But that was mighty close. Mighty close. It's going to go to a photo finish, I'm sure.
Amazing by Mark Cavendish to make it up there, but you could see the effort that it took for him to be there meant that he had no sprint left, and that's completely normal. You'd expect that. For him to be able to do that and then still be able to sprint would have been incredible, and that would have been Mark Cavendish at his absolute best. But what we saw there was the sprint of the guys we expected. Fabian Cancellara again was there, but just didn't have the form to make the sprint. He couldn't even get out of the saddle, and that's what many of those riders were like.
Well, we're thinking it might just favour Peter Sagan. That's what we think, but we'll wait, because that's too close to call. My word, David, we've had some really close finishes on this race. John Degenkolb's finishing well. Michael Matthews is finishing well. Kristoff, well, he looks like he's lost it. He thinks he's lost it. He bangs the bars. We've seen that repeatedly. This was much closer for Kristoff. Has he agonisingly lost out to the green jersey? I don't know.
Oh, Sagan.
Just.
Oh,
Well,
the bike throw got it. That's the third time we've seen bike throws get it.
oh my word.
Look, Kristoff was still pushing if he'd just thrown his bike.
Well, that was exceptional, and that was, in many ways, I mean, it was brilliant, but it was a tired sprint from all of these great riders, wasn't it? Because they were on the red before they'd even got to the Flamme Rouge to get there.
And that was the thing. That's Warren Barguil. You got to take your hat off to him, because it was him that set the pace up that final climb and set such an infernal pace that nobody could attack and come off it. So even at the top, he didn't pull off. He kept going. And look at Peter Sagan coming up, but Kristoff keeps driving to the line as you'd expect him to. But it's that bike throw that he just timed a little bit too late that lost the bike race for him.
Well, it was brilliant. It was brilliant once again from Peter Sagan. You have to say he was the favourite, and he's delivered, but by the closest of margins there. And what a ride from Alexander Kristoff. People often put him in the same category, if you like, as Andre Greipel, Marcel Kittel and Mark Cavendish, but he's proven, Alexander Kristoff, by pushing Peter Sagan as close as he did, that he is a different kind of sprinter, and he saw his opportunity today, and he so nearly made it work. He'll be devastated.
He will be devastated, but also must off our caps to Fabian Cancellara. He did a very respectful ride, considering he's not at his... But Mark Cavendish, you see in the back of the shot there,
yeah.
Mark Cavendish, who I mean, for a few seconds there, thought he might do it when we caught that glimpse of him. And you see how small that group was. It was about 30 riders, if that.
Well, it wasn't a fairy tale ending for Fabian Cancellara, but he did what he could, and he made that selection up those climbs, and Cancellara can reflect with pride on his day out in Bern on the Tour de France, his final Tour de France. And the wonderful city of Bern can also pat itself on the back for providing a really spectacular final route. Had everything, didn't it? A really dynamic breakaway, a catch, more attacks, a world champion up the road, a cobbled climb, a drag up to the finish, and a worthy winner in Peter Sagan. Sagan and Kristoff almost inseparable over the line, and There you can see the battle unfolding behind them. Fabian Cancellara in the mix, but unable to do too much about it. And the win, once again, goes to the man in the green jersey. Peter Sagan wins in Switzerland.
Astonishing record of Peter Sagan, never lower than 6th in any of the sprint stages, and first now 3 times, although by his smallest margin. Not the smallest margin of the Tour, though, probably in 3rd place too, as far as tight ones go. We'll take a break, we'll be hearing from him, and we'll have the full stage result, which we haven't had yet either, on the other side of this break. Look at that huge margin of victory by Tour de France standards this year. Sagan from Christoph, although Christoph sadly gave a winner's interview to Norwegian TV before he realised he'd lost. Peter Sagan's wife knew the score though. She was straight in there with the celebratory kiss. His 3rd stage win of what is a routine sensational tour for Sagan, although it's got more first places than it did have last year. There is the result. Sagan, Christoph, Engel was the 1-2-3. John Degenkolb showing that he's getting his legs back too, which is encouraging to see. Fabian Cancellara gave it a good go in his hometown. He finished 6th. Edvald Boasson looking to make it 2 Mandela Day victories in a row. For Dimension Data was 9th. Okay, never lower than 6th on a sprint stage so far in this Tour. Unbelievable performances in this race from Peter Sagan. Let's hear from him now.
Peter, you got it. You have your victory again on the Tour de France, but it was so tight. It was just a few centimeters. Can you take us through the final moments of the stage?
Yeah, it was a very long stage. It was very hot, and I am so happy, so proud of my team because they did a very good job, and I am so happy to win for them, for Tinkoff and for Oleg, because yeah, it's like unbelievable. A lot of times I lose the race for this, and today I won, and I don't know, I believe destiny, and now it's turning back, you know.
And you win in front of this crowd of the Slovakian fans. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's fans from Telekom Slovakia, and yeah, it's very nice. They can come here to see me and yeah, to cheer for me. It's very nice.
You have fans from Slovakia, but maybe not from Switzerland because you beat Cancellara today. But still, it must be a very happy moment for you.
I think also in the Swiss I have some fans for sure.
Thank you very much, Peter. Congratulations.
Now, you all know the sad circumstances in which Chris Boardman had to leave us, so he's not with us for the rest of the tour, but I'm glad to say that his former teammate and roommate Jens Vogt has stepped in for us. And Jens, talk us through that final kilometre, because it was all up for grabs, wasn't it? Even though the little climb up the cobbled hill had stretched things out.
Well, obviously all people knew the climb. We see tremendous work from Warren Barguil, who was really giving it everything for a potential stage win for John Degenkolb. He is pulling a very, very long time on the front. Nobody can come around him. We see on the right side Fabian Cancellara looking ready as if he wants to attack. He's just missing a bit of a sprint. Also, Mark Cavendish is right there in the middle in a perfect position. Just maybe he used too much power to survive that last climb. Now you see the team Quickstep Etix is taking over. But Christoph and Sagan are perfectly placed. Cancellara is still there. The young Norwegian rider who will finish 3rd, he is in the mix. You can't really see him yet. And here we go, Valverde, a late attack, but he cannot surprise the sprinters by that. And it looks like Christoph has a clear run for his first stage win this year. He looks convincing. It looks like, yep, he got it from the first perspective on the front. We think he had it, but as it later is revealed in the photo shoot, it's actually just one tire in favor of Sagan.
And he knows how frustrating second place can be because he had so many of them last year, although he had the consolation of the green jersey. Katusha, we heard Joaquin Rodriguez complaining that the team had abandoned him on the run into Montpellier to work for Christoph, so they seem to be putting all their eggs in the Christoph basket, so super frustrating for him.
It's clearly always a challenge if you have a sprinter and a climber or GC rider in the team. Who do you put your resources first? Today it was clearly a day that suited Christophe, and he showed he's ready, he's strong enough, he's there. He just missed 2 centimeters. But what can you do? He got beaten by Super Sagan. I mean, nobody can beat Sagan. So Christophe is just one more victim in a long line of poor people. You have to compete against Sagan. It's almost like you have to compete against Eddy Merckx. It's just no solution. He's just so much better.
Yeah, now, not that his promises are always to be relied on, but Mr. Tinkoff did say that if Peter Sagan won multiple stages, he was going to reconsider his decision to pull out at the end of the season. Sagan's calling his bluff, isn't he?
I did hear him saying that, yes, absolutely. And yes, the whole world heard it, and the whole world has it on record. So now it's up to Oleg Tinkoff to come out and go, well, sorry, it was a bluff. Or he comes out, yep, I stick to my word and I keep the team alive one more year. That would be brilliant news for cycling and also for the team.
Now, Cancellara's day in many ways, in that the Tour took the unusual step of, routing it into his hometown, paying tribute to a rider even before he retires. But Tony Martin almost stole all the glory away from him. And when he hits the brake, even when it's only in a two-man group, the peloton must be seriously scared because they know how hard he is to bring back.
Definitely it is. Tony Martin has showed many times that he basically counts for 3 riders. He is such a strong rider, and once you give him like 20 seconds, he got a bit of space on the road and he can just unleash his power. It's really hard to bring him back. And today, maybe on TV it looked easy, but for the people in the peloton, it was not easy. It was always strung out a long line. It took several teams working together to bring him back, and Tony Martin was committed to go to the very end. He never looked back once. He said, okay, I only give up when I see the next wheel coming past me. But before that, I give it all and I never give up, I never look back. So strong performance by him, and maybe an important day of training for the upcoming Olympics.
Yeah, Tony Martin heading off to the Olympics, of course. Fabian Cancellara a few years ago would have loved that cobble climb. He'd have attacked off it and maybe held the peloton off all the way to the line. He did his best today, finished 6th. He's with Daniel Friebe.
Fabian, it wasn't the ideal finale for you, but you had a good go anyway in the sprint.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a hard last 20k. I think the whole day was just like pretty fast, so there was less to think about what I'm gonna expect on the end.
I'll bring him there.
The only thing I knew at the last 5k it's gonna be really tough, and yeah, it was like that. With the heat on plus, wasn't that easy, and yeah, it was actually not a bad place, but I was missing this last little something that will maybe be in the legs, but I think on the end everyone was full gas, and when everyone is full gas like this, it's just single file, and I mean the best of the best been in the front, so we challenged all each other, and I had also a fight with Christophe kind of the last meters for the position, and yeah, even I was thinking maybe I have a go earlier, but I knew it's going to be such a long straight line, and so you cannot miss any millimeter of just yeah, just to make it an attack or something and then lose it up. I think I think it wasn't so bad so far, but I think yeah, looking forward to a rest day now because it was a hard one as well.
Was the time for any emotion out there?
Not at all. Definitely not at all. I mean, the beginning was kind of strange. A lot of riders tries to jump for break, and not really a break went, and there was some no gentleman agreement in the bunch. Kind of bunch went slow, and then again attacks, and so I also tried to go on in the beginning, and I mean I saw a few riders, they've been not jumping, and then I saw them on the end also up there. So you have to balance everything, and for sure it was hard to balance it out, what is the best or what it could be the best solution, but I think I defended myself not so bad. I mean, I think it's okay like that. I mean, I'm not a super sprinter, and to make this what maybe people think I can do always, to just sneak away or make this small attack, I think after 2 weeks is also not possible, but it's okay like that.
Thanks, Fabian.
Yeah, sounding a little bit tired, sounding a little bit disappointed, which he shouldn't be. You know, the Tour has brought the race here. Okay, he perhaps doesn't have the legs, but I mean, he's been not just a great rider in terms of results, he's been a patron of the peloton, hasn't he?
Definitely he was, but I can understand that he's a little bit disappointed of it. He had for sure big plans. And Fabian, don't forget, he's a winner, he's a champion. He don't like second, third, fourth places. And he had this in his mind that either he goes for an attack on the last kilometer, climb, or tries in a sprint. He just came a little bit short, and for sure he's a little bit down by it because it's his last tour and he would love to win a stage in his last Tour de France in his hometown. Hopefully he's gonna come back and be strong in the Olympics or upcoming World Championships later this year.
Yeah, and certainly let's hope he makes it all the way to Paris and takes the plaudits that he deserves on Sunday. Now then, we're going to take a break. On the other side, we should have the presentations for you. Welcome back. If you're just joining us today, we have our third photo finish of this year's tour. Mark Cavendish got the first, Marcel Kittel got the second, Peter Sagan has got the third, much to the frustration of Alexander Kristoff, who picks up his second place. And behind all that, the two men who spent most of the day out front. Only the broom wagon behind Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe. But they tried. Now, let's confirm the result for you. Sagan, Kristoff, Sondre Holz-Enger was the top home-based rider. The Swiss was in third. John Degenkolb fourth. Michael Matthews, who many people tipped today, fifth. Fabian Cancellara on home soil, sixth. Sepp van Marke, seventh. Maximiliano Richesi, eighth. Edvald Boassenhagen, who Dimension Data were hoping was going to score a Nelson Mandela Day victory, ninth. And Greg van Avermaet, 10th. So for the third time, Peter Sagan steps onto the podium. He steps onto the podium every day, doesn't he, for the green jersey, but his third time as stage winner. Let's get over to the presentations with Ned and David.
Peter Sagan has done it, and he's done it in Switzerland, in Bern. Huge fan club out here to greet him as well. A lot of people have made their way over from Slovakia to celebrate what must be Slovakia's greatest ever sportsman, one of the greatest cyclists the Tour de France has ever seen. I think we can already put him in that bracket, David.
Yeah, I think we can. I think I remember speaking to Matt Dwight last week, and we were talking about what about in 20 years when we look back at this, we'll be talking about him the way we talk about Eddie Merckx now. So he's respected not only within the peloton by the media, by the race organisers, by the whole sport. We can see here. I mean, the sprint he did, he timed it to perfection. He found himself isolated with 800 metres to go on the front, and once again got himself out of a situation which most riders wouldn't be able to.
And he's done it again, triumphing in Cherbourg in the pouring rain on an uphill finish. Triumphing again in Montpellier, taking advantage of the crosswinds. And now another tricky finale in Bern. No problem for Peter Sagan, even if the margin of error was minute in the end. And he got it right on the lunge. Peter Sagan taking the win and getting the better of Alexander Kristoff, for whom the frustrating wait for a stage win must go on this edition of the Tour de France. Realistically, just one more opportunity, and that's on the Champs-Élysées for Alexander Kristoff to show off what he can do, but he's getting closer. No disgrace to lose out to Peter Sagan. And the green jersey, David, is his. Essentially, he just needs to roll in. He can finish 180th now on all the rest of the stages and still get it.
No, he just needs to keep rubber side down, stay upright, and avoid any incidents, and not fall so sick that it forces him out of the race. It's got to that point now, but which is it's what we all expected to happen, and he's doing it.
Those two men, Chris Froome and Peter Sagan, get on extremely well as well. I think that Peter Sagan likes to tease Chris Froome, and I think Chris Froome probably gives a little bit back everywhere. But there's mutual respect there. But you couldn't conceive of two more different riders than Peter Sagan and Chris Froome. The one thing that does unite them, though, is that they are winners and they are racers. And Chris Froome is bearing down on history. In the all-time list of jersey wearers, this, bearing in mind, is his 39th day in the yellow jersey. He has a very select group of riders ahead of him in that table. Jacques Anquetil, Miguel Indurain, Bernardino and Eddie Merckx. Fifth on the list, Chris Froome. The number of jerseys, though, irrelevant. What he wants to do is to wear this jersey on Sunday on the Champs-Élysées in front of those supporters and take home a historic third Tour de France win.
Now let's check the GC. Christopher Froome, the only man currently in the race to have worn the yellow jersey for more days than Fabian Cancellara, incidentally. And no change at all really in the GC. We'll just run through it quickly for you. Bauke Mollema second, Adam Yates third, Nairo Quintana fourth, Alejandro Valverde fifth, and the same all the way down to Fabio Aru in 10th. And no change in the time gaps. Which is what you'd want on the GC. But before we get to the GC, a very nice touch. We have just seen, although the viewers haven't at home, both Tony Martin and Julian Alaphilippe get a joint most aggressive rider of the day prize. And there they are, which is nice. I've never seen that before.
No, and I believe us two have done a few Tour de France together. But no, never seen that before, but a really brilliant decision. I mean, like really gives this whole thing like a little bit of a human touch. They both went out there, they both suffered together, so of course they both deserve the trophy together.
And especially you had to feel for Alaphilippe yesterday, who put in such a brilliant ride, and then that mechanical prevented him from actually contesting the sprint.
So true. He almost had the stage win in his hands, and then it just slipped away. Of course he wants to have his name out there again. He wants to show himself that he's still there. So maybe after rest day he has another one in the mountains. Who knows? He seemed to be still not tired.
Yeah. Alps on the other side of the rest day. Chris Froome will wear yellow into it and out of it. Let's hear from him.
Chris, that was a pretty hectic entry to Switzerland. It was a battle of position. Can you take us through those final kilometers? You had to be at the front.
Yeah, I wasn't actually up at the front those last few kilometers. It was pretty sketchy through all the towns. A lot of road furniture, lefts and rights, and obviously over those cobbles there. Just trying to stay out of trouble, trying to get to the finish line as good as possible. I think everyone's quite glad there's a rest day tomorrow. That was a tough day out there.
5 days to go on this Tour de France. How are you feeling basically before those final big stages?
I'm pretty tired, to be honest. Definitely looking forward to that rest day, but I'm looking forward to the Alps. I mean, I'm motivated. I think the team's been great. I'm really looking forward to these last few days now.
How do you rate yourself? How do you rate your team compared to the other 2 times you won the Tour de France?
I think the team's in fantastic shape. I mean, I don't think we've ever been at this point in the race and still had nine riders left. So that's a great advantage for us. The guys are doing well. The morale's good. Obviously, we've got the leaders jersey. We've got a lot to fight for still. Just looking forward to getting back into the mountains now.
Tomorrow's rest day. What's the plan for you?
Press conference as normal, and then it'd be nice to get out for a ride with the lads and maybe stop for a coffee somewhere. Chill out a bit, yeah, definitely.
Thank you very much, Chris.
He's looking forward to that rest day press conference, isn't he? Jens, we'll move on in a second, but somebody needs to attack him to make this race interesting, don't they, in the Alps?
Yes, they should, but if they don't have the power and they don't have the form, the shape to attack him, well, what can you do? The smartest plan doesn't help you if you just cannot put it into reality. And today, bad news for all the other teams. It was a completely free day for Team Sky. They didn't have to hit the wind once. So they saved all their energy. They're going to be fresh as a daisy after the rest day. So who's going to tackle them? I'm afraid nobody.
Okay. Now then, one more chance for Alexander Kristoff, which is in Paris. He was second again today. He's talking to Daniel Friebe.
Okay. Alexander, they don't come any closer than that, do they?
No, if I throw the bike, I think I was in front, but the line came a little bit before I thought. I was just focusing on sprinting, and then I looked up and it was already past the finish line. So it was a pity, because normally I was a little bit in front of him, but still I lost it.
It hasn't been a lucky Tour de France for you, but do you take any comfort from the fact that you've obviously got your best legs back?
Yeah, I must just be positive. I did a good sprint, but unfortunately I was not. I was a little bit too tired, and I didn't really pay attention at the end where the line was, so that was a pity.
See you on the Champs-Élysées?
I hope so.
Thank you.
It's the stage everyone wants to win, isn't it? The one on the Champs-Élysées, all the sprinters, obviously, because they're the only ones with a chance. Although you've had a few digs at turning it into a breakaway day on the Champs-Élysées. You've got to think that Cavendish, given his level of confidence, even though he wasn't up there in the sprint today, would be the favourite for that.
It's easy to say, yeah, that's a safe bet. Put your money on Kev and you're very likely to win in Paris. He has proven that he can do it many years before. He wants to come back and take one more win there. Yes, Yeah, but the Champs-Élysées, it's basically the unofficial Sprinter World Championships. They all want to win there. So even Greipel, I mean, he's got to have that much pressure on him. He just wants to come back and show himself. But yes, Kev is our best bet, for sure.
OK. Kev's the best bet for Paris. Peter Sagan was the best man today. Another frustrating one for Alexander Kristoff. See you back.